Hey guys, how's it going? I just need like a minute or two and we will be ready to roll. Until then.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
All right, everybody. I need just a few more minutes, but in the meantime, we can talk with everybody here. How's it going, live stream audience? Yeah, I see you, Steven. He says we hear you, but if Ben wants to rap, that's fine with me. Oh, that's pretty cool. Ben, tell everybody where you're going to be over the holiday.
I'm going to be where's my glasses, man?
Oh, my God.
I'm going to be sunny L.A.
Sunny L.A. All right.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do in L.A.?
Eat.
You're not helping me. Tell us a little more about what you're going to do in L.A.
You know, go visit family and relax. We're going to have a full week worth of interviews. So it's not like we've worked double overtime over here at the Ben Joravsky Show, lining up interviews, and we're going to drop them all next week. Some great interviews, including one excellent one yesterday with Samina Mustafa.
That's correct.
And Leticia Wallace on the debate. I thought that was really top of the line interview. So we got about a ton of interviews. We're going to be dropping the whole week. Now it's coming in. Look, oh yeah, it sounded loud and clear. So yeah, I'm looking forward to all these great interviews that we've had. We're going to drop them one by one over the next few days. And Dennis will be down in Alton. I'll be in L.A. We'll come right back and do it again. See where we're standing as a civilization in the city of Chicago. Right, D?
That's absolutely right. And I'm going back to Alton. It's going to be pretty boring, but, it'll be a good time. I'll get to see my family.
This sounds great. I'm hearing it.
Level sound good?
Yeah, level sounds good. A little technical difficulties.
Excellent. Just hang tight with us, guys. I don't want to just keep playing this music the whole time, so I figure we talk to you a little bit. Let's see here. Brianna weighed in. She says, oh, no, MC Ben in the hizzy.
Oh, I got to get my glasses out, man.
And then Juan weighed in. I don't know what you're talking about here, Juan. Juan says, no, you should drop on Netflix style all at once.
Oh, whoa.
Oh, you know what he's talking about?
Yeah. Hold on, get the shades on. Yeah, I know what he's talking about. That's actually whoa. Then people can binge, dude. See, I know what you're talking about. In other words, we have about 7 interviews. We just did an interview yesterday with the folks from the Alliance for Police Accountability, the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability. Fascinating, in my humble opinion, interview about the whole issue of police brutality and police oversight and their efforts to get the city of Chicago to pass an ordinance on this one. So, and then in the same day, we did an interview with Samina and Leticia on the debate. All right. And let's see, what was the other interview we did on Wednesday? This is a true test of my ability to do my short-term memory ability. We did the NBA basketball one with Joe Cowley. We have that on the, and then, oh my goodness, the Irishman. Whoa. There was Total Geek City here in this room, Adolfo and Sergio going on about the Irishman, gangster movies, and Jimmy Hoffa and what really happened to Jimmy Hoffa, that kind of thing. So what he's suggesting, D, is that we should be like Netflix, take all 7 of the interviews that we have and drop them at once.
Whoa.
Yeah, so people could just like binge. That, you know what? We're going to have a show discussion, which is Dennis and myself sitting around going, what do you think? As to whether that's a good idea. That's what he means by Netflix drop, so it's a total binge. We also have another interview coming in today. And then we got the questions, so we get the questions interview. We have to do that yet, D. That's something else.
The questions,
the questions,
man.
We're
going to be talking more about that a little later on here. This little error I'm having here needs Brian the Techie. And, well, I ran in there and he's in a meeting. So, Ben, if you could just please tell us, just start here. Tell us what day it is and why.
Oh, you want me to just start with the show?
Start with the show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. That's the introduction song. Now I'll do Dennis. And now he's not a mayor of anything.
Boy, let Dennis stick to being Dennis, pal.
He's not a mayor of anything. Chicago Reader Comics, Ben Joravsky. Hello, everybody, Ben Joravsky. How about that, D, huh?
That was good.
I am Dr. D. I went to radio school, and now Ben Joravsky. Hello, everybody, Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Rice and Beans Friday. And here's
oh my God, I love rice and beans.
Yeah, right. We're just going to start right in and figure this stuff out later, right, D?
Yep.
All right, very good. I want to give a shout out to education reporter Nader Issa for writing the following story in today's Bright One, my beloved Bright One. And the headline is, Reduced Paychecks Hit School Support Workers Hard After Strike. Very good story, good job. It's about the 7,500 security guards, bus aides, and custodians who missed out on about 11 days of wages because of the recent strike. As a result of those lost wages, times are hard for these employees. They don't make a lot of money to begin with. Losing 11 days of wages means it's even harder to make ends meet. And here's a quote from the story that ran in today's Sun-Times from one employee. Quote, "Currently, right now in my home, our refrigerator looks bare. It looks like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. It has a juice here and there, maybe some bread if you're lucky. It's been a struggle." Now, I know what you're thinking out there, some of our listeners, some of our hard-hearted listeners, some of our Republican listeners, some of our Trump-loving listeners, some of our Chicago Tribune editorial lovers listeners, some of our lakefront Rahm-type listeners, some of our mainstream We Love Mayor Pete listeners out there. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, Rumph, they should have thought about that before they went on strike, right? Yeah. So stop complaining. Yes, it's just always lovely to encounter face to face just the warm, fuzzy hearts of that bunch that's out there. I know you're out there, people. I know some of you actually listen, but here's the thing. These employees went on strike to defend a principle that they get a living wage for doing important work for school children in Chicago. And I think even our hard-hearted We Love Mayor Pete listeners would agree that working for in the schools and being a bus aide and being a custodian and being a teacher's aide, etc., that's important work. And so they need to have a living wage. So that's an important issue that they went on strike on. Also, they joined forces with the teachers who went on strike, demanding that the school system set aside more money to hire nurses and counselors and librarians for the schools. So I'm not here to relitigate the whole strike, but one more time, I do not believe in the employees of the Chicago Public Schools should have had to go on strike for these things. I'd like to believe that a civilized city like the city of Chicago, where I live, would have had the forethought to deal with these issues in the first place without the employees having to go and strike over them. Here's another quote from a woman named Norma Price, a CPS bus aide. She said she's working to catch up on her bills, but probably won't be able to catch up on those bills until January. Quote, "We don't make a lot of money in the first place, so when we had to go on strike, that hurt us. If you're going to suffer, at least suffer for something that you know is right," she said. "If I had to eat beans and rice for a whole year, I would do it. It was worth it." With Thanksgiving just on the horizon, I'd like to say to Norma Price and all those other striking workers, I appreciate what you did. I appreciate the stand that you did. Thank you very much for taking it. And maybe the city on its own will use this as an opportunity to be a little more civilized in how it treats the employees who work with our neediest and most vulnerable children. We got a great show today, everybody. Rummana Hussain will be here. It is Friday, Rummana's Rundown. We have a whole list of local items we'll be talking about with Rummana, including the latest, oh my God, Smollett Gate. We'll be talking about that with Dennis as well, Kim Fox. Lots of issues to talk about with Rummana. And then one of my favorite guests, David Faris, will be here. He, of course, is the Roosevelt University political science professor who wrote the book, Time to Fight Dirty, How Democrats Can Build a Lasting Majority in American Politics. His central thesis is that Democrats have to behave more like Republicans, not in the bills that they pass, not in hard-hearted legislation that takes from the poor and gives to the rich, but no, just tactically fight harder. So we'll be really curious to see what he thinks about the impeachment, what he thinks about the Democratic debate, what he thinks about the advice that people like Rahm Emanuel and Barack Obama, the centrist wing of the Democratic Party, are giving to their leftist counterparts, their more progressive counterparts in the Democratic Party. Barack Obama just gave another speech. I saw it in the paper today where he's counseling restraint on the part of Democrats. So it'll be interesting to hear what David Faris has to say on that. Looking forward to that interview. But before we do any of that, turn things over to the young man from Alton, Dr. D with the news.
Hey, how we doing, everybody? I'm Dennis. All right, before we find out what's happening in Chicago and or Illinois this week, well, first, I want to remind everybody, because I didn't announce it at the beginning of the show, that today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you in part by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and, of course, today's show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. All right, but before we get into the news, we want to remind everybody one more time here that all next week we will have no live shows. We're going away for the holiday. Ben will be hanging out like a movie star in Los Angeles, California. And me, I'll just be in Alton, Illinois, hanging out like Larry the Cable Guy. Yeah, he's a movie star.
Where's your sunglasses then?
Oh, they're down there. On the
Okay,
ground.
put your sunglasses on. You're going to Alton.
It's winter time. I don't really wear sunglasses. All right, but
Why? The sun is out.
hey,
It's a
right.
sunny
I'm not a
day.
big sunglasses guy. I don't like sunglasses.
Yeah, you don't wear them in the summer either.
No, not really.
All right.
I feel like I'm trying to be like some cool guy or something. I don't know.
See, that's the part I don't get. It's like if the sun is in your eyes and you're squinting and you're getting a headache, what do you care? We've had this conversation many times walking down the street, as I recall.
But we're going to try our very best to keep all of you from jonesing for Joravsky, all right, with a few Benny J bonus interviews and a handful of our best interviews from the past, handpicked by our very own sunglass-wearing Ben Joravsky.
It's bright in this room, isn't it?
Not really. I hope he washed his hands before doing picking these shows.
Oh,
We have a Ben Joravsky Loves the Bulls special with Sun-Times Bulls writer Joe Colley.
Joey C.
And the return of Miles, the editor/intern. You remember him, listeners? Miles? Yeah, he was around back in those days when we used to have interns. I call them the good old days.
Editors, we called them.
Yeah, well, they grabbed the door and I loved it because I got to go outside, put my hat on, and get these people every time.
I'll give you my sunglasses tempered
Oh,
with
please.
the sun.
Oh, thank you. Ben, what other bonus interviews do we have lined up?
Well, I said that we have the GAPA one, which is about
Or
police
explain it again, 'cause
accountability.
this is the download. You were explaining to the live stream, so this
Got
is
it.
the download.
Got it. The GAPA, the Alliance, the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability. We'll be talking about police issues in the city of Chicago. We have Leticia Wallace and Samina Mustafa. I love this one, folks, a breakdown of the debates. And we're going off on a whole tangential discussion about black voters in the Democratic Party that I found was fascinating. Leticia Wallace had some really interesting and thoughtful things to say on that subject as well. And then the deep dive, three film geeks sitting around a room obsessively talking about The Irishman, Martin Scorsese, and gangster movies. We did this in the summer, D. We did a three film geeks sitting around the room talking about Quentin Tarantino and Once Upon a Time in America. It's one of our most popular...
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
What did I say?
America.
I do that all the time. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's one of our most popular shows that we've ever taped. So this one is all you film geeks out there. You're going to go for this one. Big time deep dive on gangster flicks and The Irishman. So look at that. Those are the ones I can remember off the top. I think there's another one that I'm forgetting. I'm just doing this off the top of my head.
And a shout out to the listeners who sent us their emails recently. We asked you to send us some questions, whatever they are, and we will answer them with a Thanksgiving Benny J Q&A bonus. Our good friend Steven on the live stream, well, he sent us about 50 questions, so make sure you tune in. I'll more than likely be giving Steven a hard time for doing that, and we'll answer maybe 6 of those questions, Steven.
Are we going to deal with the one he sent to us on Facebook? Is that the same Steven who sent the one on Facebook?
I'm going to do the ones that we got here on the email.
Got it.
Benny,
I will jump ahead of us.
Send your questions in ASAP. We're going to be recording this after today's show, probably around 4 o'clock. BennyJShow@gmail.com. BENNY, the letter J, show@gmail.com. It's our Benny J Q&A bonus special. Trolling is encouraged, and I think to make things interesting, what I'll do here...
Trolling is encouraged.
You don't hear that enough, do you?
You never hear it. Yeah, go ahead, troll us.
Yeah, that's perfect for this Q&A thing.
Trolling is encouraged.
And I think to make things interesting, what I'll do is I'll throw a laptop in Ben's face, and I'll have him read the questions. That'll be pretty cool, right?
I get to be the guy with the laptop.
We're going to find out if you could be the guy with the laptop with our Benny J Q&A bonus special. Benny J is going to take the deep dive with you, the listener, and modern technology.
I'm not too good with the laptops, but I'll really give it my best shot.
That's why we're going to try, because you're not too good with it. So we hope you enjoy the material that we're going to be publishing while we're away. We'll be back on Tuesday, December 3rd. All right, let's talk about the local news. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
The mayor is ending her week out with a morning visit to City Hall, where she'll deliver remarks at the Carter Harrison and Lambert Tree Fire and Police Awards ceremony.
Oh, I didn't know they named it after Carter Harrison.
Yep. And tonight she'll deliver remarks at the 106th Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Millennium Park. Well, that sounds fun. It's not too cold out. That ought to be a good time.
Yeah. They have it in Millennium Park now, huh? That's how little I follow these things. It used to be in the Daily Plot. I don't follow. Christmas tree lighting, it's not my beat. You know what I'm saying, D?
Not big on the Christmas tree lights.
No,
huh?
it's just, I cover other things. That's not my beat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, there's people out there dying for that Christmas tree light column.
And you know what? When she's going to begin it by saying, "This little tree light of mine, I'm going to let it shine."
Guys, we got 1 million up here, right? We've only been on for like 20 minutes.
I love it when he plays that bit. It always cracks me. This little light of mine.
Mayor Lightfoot gave a pretty big political endorsement Thursday. You know, Benny J, it's funny how the world works. It was a year ago when Lori Lightfoot was only a candidate for mayor. And on November 22nd, 2018, let's be honest, Chicago political know-it-alls, none of you thought she had a chance, us included, all right? Because as I sift through the memories of Ben Joravsky's show past, yes, I'm blocking the thoughts of Ben getting fired. Remembering the good moments, all right? I don't recall mentioning any big endorsements for Lori Lightfoot. I do remember quite a few endorsements for candidate and Cook County President Tony Preckwinkle. But here we are, 2019. Holy crap, Lori Lightfoot won. And now she's the one giving out the big endorsements, huh?
Yes, she is giving out those big endorsements. By the way, I just have to do a reminder. When you alluded to when a year ago when nobody thought Lori Lightfoot was going to win. Well, actually, about a year ago, she was already in the race. Rahm had dropped out. But anyway, Steve James, the filmmaker who made Hoop Dreams, did a documentary about that run, the race for mayor, and I got to see like a rough draft of it, and it brought back all these memories, a flood of memories, D, including the one, he wasn't there, but and I think of Lori Lightfoot in those days before anybody took her seriously. I just think of her at that Labor Day gathering where she was hanging out with you. That's how desperate she was. She was hanging out with Dr.
Hey, come on, dude.
She was like, "I got your vote, right, Dr. D?" And he goes, "You can count on me." But remember that day was so hot, it was sweating. And you're right, back then, it just was very hard to predict that Lori Lightfoot was going to win, be our next mayor. And so you're right, you're absolutely correct. Who Lori Lightfoot would endorse for any office would not be considered newsworthy. I guess things have changed. But since she's the mayor. But yeah, watching that Steve James documentary, we'll talk about this more in a few weeks. That brought back a lot of memories of that election.
Well, we really know how Ben Joravsky feels when the microphones are turned on, huh? Why'd you have to say that about me and Lori Lightfoot?
Oh, the part where she had your endorsement?
Yeah. All right, and well, let's see here. Last night, Lightfoot and her mayoral runoff opponent, Tony Preckwinkle, both endorsed Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx's reelection campaign. Earlier in the week, Fox announced her reelection bid, and with that announcement came, well, what everybody does these days when you announce you're running in an election, well, at least if you have a crap load of money. Kim Foxx put out a political campaign ad. Ever since, we can't stop talking about it. Thursday, Fox also picked up endorsements from the other top Democratic political figures in Illinois. In fact, wait, let me check here. Yep. Okay, yep, damn near all of them.
They're lining up.
Senators Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, Representatives Bobby Rush, Danny Davis, Jan Schakowsky, and Robin Kelly. And finally, yes, the big feller himself, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Ben Joravsky, are you surprised at all by this overwhelming amount of support for State's Attorney Kim Foxx?
No, I'm not surprised. And as I said yesterday, I think Kim Foxx will win the primary. I believe that Democratic voters in Cook County, a plurality of Democratic voters in Cook County, are going to view this as a contest between Trump lovers and Kim Foxx. And if it comes down to Trump lovers versus Kim Foxx, they're going with Kim Foxx, even if Kim Foxx was, how did she put it? I forget how she twisted it, put those words together. She didn't handle it as well as she could have. We'll be talking about more later with Ramona Hussain on this one because there's more Smollett Gate updates. But she took the phone call from Tina Chen. Probably shouldn't have done that. She made the phone call to Eddie Johnson on behalf of Tina Chen and Jussie Smollett. She shouldn't have done that. So it's absolutely clear She shouldn't have done it. She shouldn't have treated this matter the way she did. On the other hand, the people, the greatest voice, the greatest chorus against her are those who are defending Donald John Trump. So on one hand, you've got law and order advocates essentially advocating lawlessness on the part of our president, and then saying it's absolutely wrong for Kim Foxx to deviate in any way from acceptable political behavior. So most voters will look at that and go, Republicans are a bunch of hypocrites. If my enemies are against Kim Foxx, I'm going to be on the side of Kim Foxx, and she will be victorious, in my humble opinion, in the Democratic primary. And these top-ranking Democrats see that, and they're jumping aboard.
All right, well, we just mentioned our Illinois governor. Let's mention him some more, huh? Today, J.B. Pritzker's in Springfield to announce the next phase of the Springfield Rail Improvements Project, a project made possible by Rebuild Illinois. In other statewide news, we have an update on the leading contender for Illinois Senate President John Cullerton's gig. And you know what, actually? We're not going to talk about that for a minute. We're going to talk about Kimberly not Lightfoot, Lightford a little later on in the program. Right now, I have some audio to play for you, Benny J. We're going to see how this goes because my computer's not really working to play the audio. I'll just play it from my computer into the microphone.
See how it goes.
Oh, boy, we're winging it today. Our podcast roommate, Fran the Woman Spielman, had an interesting guest on her program today. It should be available for download. It should be right now at chicagosuntimes.com. If not, it'll be up a little later. Her guest, former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Yes, Rahm was in this studio. The giant Ben Joravsky show banners were hanging up and everything. It was awkward. He sat down and talked one-on-one with Fran, and he shared his thoughts on a couple of things. He made it clear he didn't want to talk city politics, but he did have some things that Ben will more than likely disagree with about the 2020 Democratic primary. And if anyone listening is maybe listening to the show for the first time, or maybe if they're unfamiliar with Ben Joravsky and who he is, well, you couldn't have picked a better time to join us because our host can't stand former Mayor Rahm Emanuel.
Wait, that is so not true.
Oh,
Let me
okay.
just.
Is it?
I do not like his. I didn't think he did a great job as mayor. That's putting it mildly. I don't necessarily agree with him on ideology, but I don't know the guy. To say, if I got together, I might go, oh my God, this guy's hilarious. Let's go play hearts together or something like that. So I don't frame it and I can't stand him. I just don't like the job he did as mayor, and I don't see eye to eye with him on ideology. How about that, D? Isn't that a nicer way of saying that I can't stand the guy? I never met the guy. Actually, it's not true. I met him.
You've met him.
Once or twice about 17 years ago. So,
What was that interaction like?
Well, he was running at the time. He was, what was he doing? He was private citizen. He was making money as a hedge fund guy. And he was running. He just announced that he was going to run for Congress in the 5th Congressional District. He was running for Rod Blagojevich's old seat. And as such, he needed some coverage in the Reader newspaper, the paper I've been working for since the 80s. And the Reader is read widely throughout that district. And so he needed, he wanted a coverage in the Reader, and so he allowed me to tag along. He does this a lot. You ride-alongs with Rahm, with various reporters. So I got to ride along with Rahm for a little bit. This is 2002, D. This is a long time ago. And he was very friendly. He ducked and dodged a lot when I asked him questions. And, when the article was over, that was pretty much the end of it, my relationship with Mayor Rahm, or pre-Mayor Rahm in those days. So I don't, know the guy. I never had a conversation with him since then. Oh, no, wait, whoa. Nope, you are correct. I just remembered. I interviewed him briefly. I had I was given a 5-minute interview with him by phone when he ran for the first time in 2011 for mayor. And he got mad at my, I just remembered he got mad at my questions and hung up on me. How about that, D? He hung up on me. All right, yeah. So
damn.
That's the last time I talked to him. So I wouldn't say I can't stand the guy,
All right, now listeners, I hate to do this to you, but that was a tease, all right? That's going to have to be a tease because I'm going to fix the audio here, and I'm going to make sure we're able to play this clip of Mayor Rahm today. Our Sun Times colleague, Rummana Hussain, has joined us, so we're going to save that for a little later on, Rahm's clip with Fran Spielman. I have 2 clips to play. equally. Ben, I think you'll disagree with him.
I have a feeling I will, and we'll probably play him for David Faris when he's in here, get his thoughts on Mayor Rahm's suggestions for what the Democrats should do to defeat Donald Trump. Be curious how David Faris responds to that, right, D?
Before we go to break, we're going to go to the live stream chat here. A lot of people are weighing in, and 2 people have called me Dr. J. My name's Dennis, first off, not Dr. D.
But he plays like a Dr. J. When you've seen Dennis play basketball, he's an unbelievable basketball player.
2 words. Hook shot. All right. So our good friend Sergio Mims weighed in on the live stream chat. He had an interview on Wednesday.
I can't wait. When that drops, that's the Sergio, Adolfo, and myself going nuts over gangster movies, including The Irishman. That is a fun interview.
And he was on the Wednesday show as well. Go download it. Sergio says, "Hey guys, great time I had on Wednesday as always. Trivia question: does Dr. J?" My name's Dennis. And my middle initial is J.
Well, there you go.
But trivia question: does Dr. J know what legendary groundbreaking musician was also born in Alton, Illinois? Sergio, yes, I do.
I know too.
Miles Davis.
Miles Davis.
Yeah, I knew that.
I knew it too.
Let's see here. We got more people weighing in here. Dr. J. Ro Lesh writes, Dr. J, how do your family and friends react to you having a progressive media gig in the big bad city? Tease you or think it's cool? Yeah, they really don't.
Yeah, no, that is a good question.
And they don't know anything.
You keep it hidden, huh?
I don't keep it hidden. I just tell them, I work at this. They don't know what progressive is. They don't follow politics. Like, what's that soup? Progresso?
So progressive is a term that is progressives use, and people who are not quote unquote progressives don't use the term.
Yeah, we just don't really talk about politics in my family, so they don't really know. They're just like, I work at the Sun-Times. Cool, does it pay? Yeah, excellent. Don't ask me for money. So that's really how that goes. We're not a real big political family. Just moving up in the city, I've met political people, really.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well, there's some political people downstate.
Yeah.
Bob Dibler. He's very political.
Damn
all right, Bob Dibler.
About as political as people get downstate is with unions, I think. They're really big into their unions. So feel free to ask any other questions on the live stream chat if you want. And make sure you send us a question before 4 p.m. if you want to. BennyJShow@gmail.com. We're going to do our Benny J Q&A special. All right, we're going to take a break now. I'm going to figure out all these problems we have on our show today. And when we come back, Rummana Hussain of the Chicago Sun-Times will join us for the Rummana Rundown. It's the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times. Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Ramona Hussain is in the studio, and welcome for another Rummana rundown on Friday, Ramona.
Thanks for having me again.
Again and every Friday, except the one time when she was on vacation. I didn't make her call in. I didn't make you call in, Ramona. Not that you would have done anyway. Not that I could make you. You would have?
I would have.
Oh, you should never say that because next time I will. You'll be on the side of the road somewhere. I've done that, interviews over the side of the road. As longtime listeners know, Ramona spent several years as a reporter for the Sun-Times covering criminal justice at 22nd in California. So we spent a lot of our time talking about criminal justice issues, such as they are in Cook County. And there's a lot to talk about based just on what's in the newspapers today. So let's just start with Robert Rialmo. And I believe you edited this story, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Sam Charles wrote the story.
Yes, Sam Charles wrote the story.
This is a police shooting, a story. Well, why don't you tell the story?
This shooting happened in 2015, about a month after the Laquan McDonald video came out. So I think it was December 2015. Robert Rialmo went to a house. I forgot. It was on Erie Street. Mm-hmm. And there was calls of a domestic disturbance, and it turns out that this
West Erie Street, 4700.
Yeah, West Erie, yeah. Mm-hmm. And this young man named Quintonio LeGrier was getting into some sort of fight with his dad, or there's some sort of domestic incident with his dad, and both men actually called 911. And Rialmo went to the scene, and Quintonio LeGrier's father had motioned to a neighbor, Betty Jones, had told a neighbor, Betty Jones, to let the police officers in or open the door when they come to deal with the situation. So Betty Jones had opened the door, and she motioned to Rialmo, this is Officer Rialmo, former Officer Rialmo, to go upstairs, or that's where the incident was happening. Anyway, according to, I think Officer Rialmo said that Quintonio Greer rushed down the stairs with a bat and was coming towards him with a bat. And so he shot him and shot Betty Jones, and both Betty Jones and Quintonio LeGrier died. And so you have to remember this happened just a month after the Laquan McDonald video came out. So just about a month ago, the Chicago Police Board had recommended, or actually fired, not recommended, I should say, had fired Officer Rialmo. So he's a former officer now. And just Wednesday, he filed a lawsuit asking to be reinstated on the Chicago police. And so, this is very normal for people who are saying, why did he do this? Because of, this incident. But from what I'm told is a lot of police officers who are fired file a suit, which is, I guess, what we expect to happen. So the first hearing on the actual matter on Rialmo's suit asking that he be reinstated in the police department is going to be in March. So it's a few months from now.
And so in other words, what you're saying, it's if a police officer is fired for what bad behavior on duty, in this case, shooting two people.
Yes.
And that's euphemism, bad behavior.
Yes.
And then they have, as a recourse, generally, they file a lawsuit to get their job back. In this case, he was not criminal. He was not found guilty of criminal charges the way Jason Van Dyke was.
No. And I should point out that the Chicago Police Board, when they made their decision, it was based on the shooting of Betty Jones, not Quintonio LeGrier. So that decision was based solely on what happened with Betty Jones. And they, from their argument, or, when they came out with their decision, they're like, this could have happened without Betty Jones getting injured. And there was a civil lawsuit that was filed by Quintonio LeGrier's family, and they did. I believe that there was a settlement amount, but then it was rescinded because the jury said that the shooting was justified. It was a little confusing because when it happened. So there's a lot of moving parts in the story. And also Eddie Johnson, who's the outgoing police superintendent, he initially backed Rialmo on. He said he acted properly. And then there was all this stuff that happened with the accountability, police. I think it's COPA. It's called COPA now. So they rule. There's kind of like a back and forth that went along, and eventually this came to the police board, and the police board said that he should be fired, which happened last month.
And if you put the shootings in the context of wider political changes in the city of Chicago, then you can understand why Police Chief Eddie Johnson, a former police chief Eddie Johnson,
he's still a police chief.
Is he still chief? I thought
because there was
I thought he actually. Well, whatever. Soon to be former police chief.
The only reason I'm saying is because Franz Spielman just did a story which I edited, and the interim police superintendent. I guess he's been named, but I don't know if he's been put in place yet. But Lori Lightfoot, and Eddie Johnson were at this event.
Okay. So. All right. Soon to be former police chief Eddie
he's
Johnson.
Still hanging around.
But there's a political transformation that's going on in this city, and it's been going on really ever since Rahm was forced to release the video of Laquan McDonald when a Cook County judge ruled that Rahm had to release that in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. There's been a political transformation in the city and what is acceptable police behavior and how the city should deal with police shootings.
Correct.
And so, the Laquan McDonald video was buried for about a year. The officials were investigating it. They'd probably still be investigating that case if it wasn't for that Cook County judge making that ruling, Rummana. Yeah. And then, of course, this shooting happened about a month later, as you said. So we're like rewriting the rules on what is politically acceptable.
Yeah, I think a lot of politicians know now. People want accountability. It's not something that can be swept under a rug when there's a questionable shooting involving civilians. And then, the Dante Servin case, which this is a police officer off-duty shooting where a young woman, 22-year-old unarmed young woman, Rakia Boyd, was shot. And Dante Servin got off because prosecutors charged him with involuntary manslaughter. And the judge basically acquitted, I shouldn't say basically, he acquitted Dante Servin on those charges, but because he said that the prosecutor should have charged him with first-degree murder. And so I think even prosecutors are realizing now they have to be careful in how they charge someone. So Dante Servin last week had asked a judge to basically clear off his records, and the judge refused. And this is Leroy Martin Jr., who is the son of a former Chicago police chief. So there are people tied to law enforcement. There's prosecutors. There's politicians. I think they're being more careful than they did years before. So I think the Laquan McDonald shooting did change the way, not in all incidents. I don't want to say, because, I'm sure there's a lot of still questionable incidents that happen, and we might not know about them because there's probably no video to prove certain things.
And the fallout is still, it's not complete. Again, teasing an interview that will fall next week that we did with activists who are pushing for an ordinance that would set up a new sort of oversight, a new civilian type oversight over the police department, which people have been advocating for years and years. It's still uncertain whether Mayor Lori Lightfoot and the city council will agree to it. So the fallout, we don't know the full extent of it, but when just casual readers of the Chicago Sun-Times open up their newspaper or go online and see fired CPD officer files suit to get his job back, I think that has to quote the millennials' favorite word, a triggering effect. Of course. On people. It's like, this is the same old in the city of Chicago. This guy killed 2 people. And
but he
now
still wants his job.
He's going to get his job back, or they're going to have to cut a deal with him, and make some arrangements. Then you have the police who are saying, "Yeah, what would you do, Ben, if some guy was coming at you with a baseball bat?" So it's just like these age-old arguments. This like Chicago fight, Rummana. I've been reading about it, but you've been covering it for years. Yeah,
I was there when I was covering 26 in California when the Laquan McDonald video came out. So it was pretty tense at that time. Intense, I should say. And I was actually working on the city desk when that happened. When the when the Rialmo related shooting happened. I was working on the desk, and I remember sending Dan Mihalopoulos.
Young Daniel, a WB Easy superstar now.
I forgot what day of the week it was. It might. I don't know even because he was a Watch Dogs reporter, but it was one of those days where he got roped in to be a general assignment reporter. I'm like, there's a shooting that just happened. You got to go. So he did a really good job. I was just really grateful to have him as a reporter that day. So, so I remember when that happened too. So. And I covered most of Dante Servin's trial. The verdict came. The judge ruled on a Monday, and I used to be off Sunday, Mondays. So I remember it was kind of crazy. It's like people had to parachute in for me. So I missed that when the judge made his decision. So I covered a lot of that too. So
and we have these high-profile cases that you just alluded to. We have these verdicts. We have these payouts to families, and then it just repeat.
Yes,
it doesn't seem as though the city is in any systematic way addressing the issues at stake, whether it be the overreaction of a police officer, whether it be dealing with mentally ill people, and how to police. Why are police on the front lines dealing with someone who has a mental health issue?
Why not use a taser? I don't know. These are just questions. As a civilian, I'm sure a lot of people have. I think the needle's moved a little. I'm not saying it's moved all the way, but I think it's moved a little. I think there are people asking questions, just with the police, or with not the police necessarily, but with people asking questions, and a lot of leaders thinking that, hey, we're not going to get away with something like this.
Well, we'll see. Like I said,
I don't know.
Yeah, we will see. Well, I know you and I will be talking about this probably in the coming year as to whether the city, how much the needle has moved.
Yeah.
But I just, when I saw this headline, I thought of you. I thought of all those stories you've written. I thought of the story, just endless amounts of stories about police encounters with normal, just routine citizens on the city. Yeah. So the city paid out $16 million for the death to the family of Betty Jones. No money has been paid out to the Greer family, and now Robert Rialmo's suing to get his job back. So the criminal justice system in the city of Chicago continues along those lines. Another story, only in Chicago type story. I believe you edited this one as well.
Yeah, I did some of it. I didn't do the first edit. I did the second and third edits. But this is the lawsuit that was filed by the family of one of the young victims in the Mercy Hospital shooting. This, if you remember, it was a really sad story. It happened about a year ago, where this doctor's former boyfriend came and shot her. I think she was in the parking lot, and then he ran into, I forgot where specifically she was, but he got into the hospital and he shot this young woman named Dana Less. The doctor's name was Tamara O'Neill, and there was also a Chicago police officer who was killed, Samuel Jimenez. And the gunman basically shot 3 people. And so the family of Danya Less, who I think was a pharmacy intern, I forgot, but she was an employee of the hospital. She just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. I think she was coming out of elevator, if I remember correctly. Anyway, her family sued Mercy Hospital, SDI Security Company, and Trinity Healthcare, which might be the overall subsidy or whatever bigger group that Mercy Hospital is under. But they filed a lawsuit saying that, the security company didn't do their job. And I have a backstory about this. So when I was editing the story, the story was embargoed. We knew about it, but we had to wait until the lawsuit was actually filed. And I get a call from Fran Spielman, who tells me, she goes, "Do you have a story about Mercy Hospital being sued by by the family of one of the victims?" I'm like, "Yeah, we do. We're just waiting. It's embargoed. We're waiting until they actually file it." Because that's when." And she's like, "Well," she goes, "Do you know about SDI?" And I was like, "No." She goes, "That's Patrick Huell's old company. We got to put this in the story." So she was very gracious enough to add some background to the story. Patrick Huell's is a former alderman who actually had to resign because of a series of Sun-Times stories in 1997. And
when Rummana was still in grade school.
No. I was, you know what? The funny thing is, I was actually at City Hall probably by this point. Yeah. By City Hall, or I was about to be at City Hall. I was a young reporter, got sent to City Hall to cover City Hall with Liam Ford, who's now at the Chicago Tribune, and we both covered City Hall together. And so I knew Fran Spielman back then. So she was hiding under her desk and doing all these stories, whispering, and had like 10 stories. She'd come in at 9 a.m. She'd come in all before us, and she'd leave at 5 o'clock, and she'd have like double the stories of everybody at that city hall.
No, she
press room.
is.
But anyway,
amazing,
she told me, she reminded me, and I vaguely remembered, I wasn't uncovering these kind of stories at the time, but she's, SDI is, I think Patrick Huell still owns the company. And Ed Burke also had ties to this company. He was a licensee in charge of this company. So she talked about, I guess what he did was he gave $1.1 million to Michael Taden, who was a city trucking contractor. And I think
Other way around.
Was it the other way around?
Taden lent him money. It was a loan.
Yeah, lent him money.
It was a loan.
Yeah, and then I think
million.
Huell's gave him in exchange for that. Didn't she give him a subsidy?
He helped get him a
city subs.
Yeah. In other words, Taden had this trucking company, and he got contracts from the city to operate various trucking services for the city. In the meanwhile, he lent money, $1.1 million to Patrick Huell, who was, I believe at the time, Mayor Daley's floor leader. He was a very influential alderman in the city council.
He was a big deal.
Bridgeport's alderman. He's 11th Ward alderman. That's the Daley's ancestral home, Bridgeport. And it was a huge scandal.
Yeah, and so Fran just pointed that out. And in that story, in the print edition, there's like at least 4 or 5 more paragraphs that Fran added to the background, and she kind of got to the heart of it. So that is a politically connected security company. And so this family is saying that SDI didn't do their job, didn't put out a code silver when they were supposed to. I guess that's some specific code when they take action. And in the meantime, SDI sued the city of Chicago, saying the city didn't do their job when this incident happened. They said the police officers didn't take care of the situation quicker than they should have. So it's kind of interesting, and the city didn't respond to our comments too. But it's just a sad story, and just has all these political. The security company has this political background or political ties.
Well, this is the classic aftermath of a horrific story.
Mm-hmm.
We had this horrific story of the shooting at Mercy Hospital, and then in the aftermath, it turns into lawsuits and the litigation, and you have this company that was supposedly acting as a security force, then to defend itself, throwing the police department under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So, we were talking about Realmo ultimately using the courts to get his job back. So here we have the courts being the deciders on who's liable. And if I had a bet, what Hughes will try to do is make the city the only liable source so that his company is protected. And again, one more time, this is a former alderman, Mayor Daley's alderman, floor leader, for the Pride and Joy of Bridgeport of the 11th Ward. And Ramona, I have to tell you, when I saw this again, I just this brings home so many recurring themes in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? The way these matters get adjudicated forever in the courts.
And the names keep popping up. Same names keep popping up, like even years later. I know Fran's like, this happened 20-something years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, it was that long ago. And so I do remember the name. And I just remember, I was like, oh, I do vaguely remember. Like I said, I wasn't uncovering these stories. These are stories that I was trying to follow. But
and I remember, just on a personal, back then in 1996, I wasn't covering politics on a routine basis. I was doing neighborhood stories. And I just remember so clearly the fallout, reading it obsessively. I don't think I ever wrote about it. Maybe I did. I don't know. Who can remember? It's 20 years ago. But just
over 20 years ago.
It was over 20 years ago. But the headlines and the furor about it, and the fact that once again Chicago with the Huells, there was a high-ranking Chicago official in this debatable position, this controversial position, this borderline illegal position with a city contractor. And remember, Mayor Daley was promising reform. This will never happen again. And and here we are. It's just like Mayor Lightfoot was ultimately elected in large part because voters supposedly had enough of this stuff. 20 years later, they had enough of this stuff and revolted against, the Ed Burks and what have you. So, yeah, some stories just never seem to go away. Speaking of which, I know you edited the latest version of Smollett Gate.
Yeah, I did some of that. Jussie Smollett filed a countersuit, I believe, to the city's lawsuit seeking the money that they spent in police that the Chicago police spent in overtime in examining his case. And as we know, this Jussie Smollett was an actor on the show Empire, and he said that he was attacked by two men wearing MAGA hats. And it turned out, according to officials, is that he made the whole thing up. And the two men who, quote unquote, attacked him were bodybuilders who at least one of them he hired as a personal trainer. So it was a hoax, according to Chicago police. And then there was some controversy on his criminal side because the charges were dropped or in some sort of deal where he paid $10,000 to the city, but he didn't have to admit guilt. So that's controversy on that side. But then the city had filed a lawsuit in federal court asking for over $130,000. I think it's $130,000. It's a six-figure amount. And Jussie Smollett doesn't want to pay it. So he filed a lawsuit earlier this week saying that he was not, he does not owe the Chicago police this money. So I think this is the stories. When you think it's going to die, the story is going to die, or at least kind of like things are going to calm down. There's going to be a lull. It just comes back up again.
Yeah.
So,
and this is just one aspect of how it will come back. Don't forget.
Yeah. Of course, Kim Foxx this week also announced, she formally announced that she's going to be seeking re-election. And then she kind of took responsibility for the way she handled the Jussie Smollett case, because we know there's questions about that right now. There's investigations going on. I believe the Cook County Inspector General's office is studying how Kim Foxx and her and people who work for her or her prosecutors handle the case. And there is also a separate court hearing in criminal courts about this matter too. So those are pending. Yeah. So this case isn't going to go away. So Kim Foxx said something. I think she said something to the matter of I own it. I'm owning, what happened with Jussie Smollett.
Let me ask
she
you
never
about
really
that.
said anything.
I know.
So she never I don't know what you own yet.
Yeah.
So.
Let's get into that. I mean, one of the little things I was going to do with you is talk about
the Chicagopedia. I was actually just talking to Bob Hergith about that.
Put it together.
We might kind of make fun of you, but he told me.
You told him that? Yeah.
I said maybe a little.
Maybe a little.
I won't make
just a little. But Rummana's been known to make fun of Bob Hergith from time to time.
I make fun of. I was just making fun of my husband with him, so it's fine. But Mick Dumke, who's my husband, worked with Bob in the Watchdogs. But Bob said there's going to be another one coming, and it's a very popular item. He said about 85% of people we've been getting questions apparently from a lot of people across the country about where they can buy it. Yeah. And I think we've gotten orders for a lot. So apparently it's very popular. So Bob said 85% of the commentary on that matter on this Chicagopedia booklet is positive, and 15% has been like, you got this wrong, or you got that wrong. Oh my
God, that's so Chicago right there.
I did tell him.
We got emails. Come on now.
We've already gotten
you
emails.
Guys did too?
Oh my God. First of all, I've been obsessively talking about. Okay, let me just back up and say, I don't have to go out and buy it. You know why, Ramona?
Because I subscribe.
I'm a home subscriber. And thank you, Robert Mueller. And it was part of my Bright one when
I am
delivered.
Too.
Okay,
I'm a subscriber too. So I saw it and I read through it. I asked Bob. He got a lot of younger reporters to help him with it. Sam Charles, was we just mentioned, with who wrote the Robert Rialmo story this week. Mm-hmm. Bob said that he was very instrumental. And then there's other reporters who lived in different parts of the city. And just to let you know, Bob Hergith grew up in Wilmette.
There's the bus thrown underneath.
No, but I like it.
Wait, is there any reference to Wilmette in this?
No, but I told him. I told him, I gave him a dirty look and said, thanks for putting anything Indian related in there. What about Devon Avenue? And then so he was laughing.
Next book.
I was totally joking.
Yeah.
I was totally joking.
Sort of.
But anyway, yes, sort of. But he told me he did one 15 years ago, actually, when he was at the Sun-Times the first time. Well, but he said it was a very He told me I could put he said, he goes, if you have any suggestions that are Lincolnwood centric, but he's like, I don't want to make it too North Shore or like North Suburban.
Well, all right,
like,
here's
and then someone was joking with him about putting stuff about Milwaukee in there, and I'm like, because he has Brett Favre in there.
Yeah, I don't know why he's in here.
But he said he likes ripping Milwaukee or something.
I don't know. That was a stretch.
I didn't get that either.
I'm going to bring him on because I'm going to give him a lot. I'm going to give him heat about the sports section of this thing. You could tell that the people who wrote this thing are not sports fans. But
you should tell him that.
I'm definitely telling him that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to accentuate the negative because I'm having a blast with this book.
It's fun.
All right, now here's the part I want to ask you about.
Fun.
This is the part. It's not in this book, but Kim Foxx in the commercial regarding, her handling of
the Jussie Smollett investigation.
Smollett, yes, Smollett Gate, as we call it, said, I own that. And Mayor Rahm, Dennis's favorite mayor.
How did you know?
Just had to say
you guys are probably glad he was here today.
He was here. The joke is he drank from that water. So if you drink from that water too, Rummana, you'll turn into a Republican. That's the old joke.
How do you know I'm not already one? No,
I know you're not. I know you're not. Now, I know she likes to pretend that she's objective. Da, 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 da. Sometimes I plead you, give this woman a column, all right? Then you'll know where she stands on all these issues. But anyway, Mayor Rahm, when he was in trouble and running for re-election in 2015, did that commercial. He put the sweater on, and he goes, I know I'm
humble guy.
No,
cozy guy.
No, what would Hergith call it? Am I allowed to say it? What Hergith? He essentially said,
no, don't say that. The J word.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to. I know this guy's so hard on me. I can't say any words.
That's not one of the
we have
7
guests that come in
words,
here and
is it?
drop F-bombs and this and that.
Thanksgiving's next week.
Anyway, Mayor Rahm essentially said, I know I'm a J off, but I'm wearing a sweater now, and I own that. Remember, he said I own that, and now you got Kim Foxx saying I own that. Does that deserve entry in Chicagopedia?
Own that? Yeah.
Own that? Is that like a Chicago thing now?
I'll mention that to Bob. There are some things in there I just feel like I was too old. I'm like, I didn't know that. And a couple of us were talking about different things. We're like, I didn't know that. But then we're like, maybe it's an age thing. We're just too old. I said we should do a nostalgia thing.
There's stuff in here that is I'm too young for, and there's stuff in here that I'm too old for.
I agree. But it was fun. It's fun.
It's a lot of fun. Here we go. All right, I'll give you one example. This is one thing. I just opened to this. I don't know why this is particularly Chicago, but skunk. Skunk is in here.
I think there's a lot of
good
skunks.
weed, right?
No, it's not reefer.
It's just a little
I would have thought it was reefer, but he goes, smelly creature that lives on every single block in the city and suburbs. Darwinian victor rivaling rats, raccoons, and opossums as the dominant alley creature in parts of the Chicago area. I don't know, man.
There are a lot of in the north suburbs.
Oh, so that's the North Suburban thing.
Well, when Bob was telling me that he doesn't want me to do too many things, I'm totally joking, but he's like, I don't want it to be like total North Suburban thing either. And then another editor of ours who went to Niles East, I went to Niles West, and he goes, says the white guy from the North Shore.
And then she's here's another one. The big snow. Not the blizzard of 79 that famously cost Mayor Michael Blandick his job. Rather, it's the blizzard of 67. Whopping 23 inches was dumped. Now, why is that the big snow as opposed to 1979? This 1979 was the one that had the greatest political impact. It drove Jay Burton into office.
I wasn't there for 67, but
I'm younger than you, Ben.
I'm not that much younger, I guess. But so the one in 1979 blizzard, I remember that vividly. I was a kid, but I actually went to India. We went to India for that winter, for vacation, and we took an extra 2 weeks. Those are the days when you could just take extra vacation. The teachers would be like, as long as you do your homework, that's
you could
fine.
still do it, by the way. Yeah.
No, you can't. They're very strict now.
Are they?
You can't just get off.
This is actually an issue right now with the Chicago Public Schools, because to make up the days for the strike, they've added days that are corresponding with when people would be on vacation.
Yeah.
And we had Troy LaRaviere going on, and he was actually very right. He thinks that most people will just, hey, we got vacation. We got our, if you're got out of town, I'm supposed to visit Aunt Mary and in Alton. I'm going down there. I can't miss the Alton trip. And that's just a shout out to Dennis. So anyway, it's still sort of an issue.
So I just remember coming back and there was just so much snow. And I just remember playing in the snow. And
79.
Some people told me that they would sled off the roofs of the home.
No,
so I remember 79.
But
and I remember
67. That's how old I am.
I don't think I remember the political impact because I was younger, but I just remember it was after that. It's like the streets of Chicago are always so clean. And growing up in Lincolnwood, if you're, Lincolnwood is a suburb literally outside the city and the northwest side. So when you would be driving on Cicero, it's like if it was a Lincolnwood side, it's like, it's like a smaller suburb. The snow would be like there'd still be a little snow, and as soon as you get into the city, it's totally clean.
All right, now
you could always tell.
Let's make the pivot to the always the last item of our show, Rummana's recommendation. I want to promote one more time the download interview we did, which will be dropping. Dennis and I will figure out. Sergio Mims and Adolfo Mondragon came on, and we went through The Irishman from top to bottom. We did gangster movies. I would have invited you to the show, but you hadn't seen.
And I still have to see it.
Yeah, you still have to see it. It's a must watch. But the part, I think I told you already, there is an error. There is the great Marty Scorsese, and I revere the guy. I think he's one of the greatest directors of all time, made an error in that movie, and he's alluding to the killing, and there's a Lincolnwood connection here, the killing of Alan Dorfman, the sleazy accountant who was overseeing the Teamsters pension fund. He was gunned down outside the old Purple Hyatt at Touhy and Lincoln Avenue, just west of Lincoln on Touhy, in Lincolnwood, not far from where Rummana was married, and grew up. And he was gunned down there in 1983, but in the movie, they say 1979.
Yeah, and I actually knew it was 83 because I remember how old I was when it happened. Because when I was a kid, I just remember hearing that someone was murdered there. I didn't know it was a gangster. We just remember people talking about it. And I remember my dad used to get Time Magazine. And I remember there was an article in Time Magazine about the murder. So it was a big deal. I just didn't know who it was. But I just remember walking around there as a kid and be like, oh no, what if I get shot because of what happened? So that's when I told you, I remember it was 1983. I totally remember it.
Yes.
It was 1983.
And they say 79. Can you
how
believe?
did it?
I have no idea. You know what? I'm wondering.
Who researches these things?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a great point. Who's researching fact checkers?
Because when these movie directors make movies, or even the costumes, like I've heard that even the underwear, it's like they even make the actors wear specific undergarments that people were wearing in that time period. So you just wonder, like, how do you make a mistake from 79 to 83?
Well, I'll be really curious if they edit it. We'll know if Marty Scorsese's a big listener to the Ben Joravsky show. He's a frequent listener. He texts in from time to time. And he loves
Monroe.
He loves Monroe, Sergio, and David Faris, our next guest. Those are his three favorites right there. But I'd be really curious if he changes it. The drop, I believe, the Netflix drop is this coming Wednesday.
Is it?
I want to say it's the 27th. And I
thought it was in December, but
no, it's next. It's
perfect.
Next Wednesday. I want to say
that's the Netflix drop.
Yeah.
Wednesday the 27th.
Yes, I think
that's
so.
when the podcast will come out.
Oh, cool.
That's the brains. See, that's why he's the brains of the show, and I'm just a good-looking guy. He is the one. That's a good idea. We're going to drop that interview with Sergio. We talk about The Irishman. So anyway, all right. So Rummana's recommendation. That's my recommendation. I urge everyone, even though he made that mistake about Alan Dorfman. What a great flick. Do yourself a favor if you're into gangster movies. Or
I do like them. I do want to watch it. I wasn't sure if I should watch it on the big screen or Netflix.
Well, it's definitely a big screen.
Do you think it's a big screen film?
Yeah, absolutely a big screen movie.
We'll probably watch it. I told you we saw Parasite last week.
Yes,
which I loved.
Yes, that two thumbs way.
You don't want to see. You don't want to see Mr. Rogers.
I mean, I guess I'm going to have to. Is that what you're going to see? Is that your recommendation?
That's not. I still have to see. Like, I still want to see. I want to see other movies before Mr. Rogers. I saw the documentary last year. Did you see that?
Yes,
that was really good. Mm-hmm. So good. I don't know if I grew up. I don't know if was Mr. Rogers around when you were...
Okay, I'll bet. Was there television when you were a kid?
No. I just don't. I forgot what year.
You know what? I got to tell you this. This is since I'm going to bare my soul to you, Rummana. My family did not have a TV when I was growing up. Talk about a hardship. One of those TV rots your brain.
Isn't that like a really lefty thing that people do? Like some really, really progressive individuals would have that.
I don't know.
Do you ever read
don't
that
know.
book?
I don't think my parents were doing it for political, ideological reasons. They actually thought that television rotted your brain.
Yeah, my parents thought that too. We had to turn off TV like by 4:00.
Yeah.
So we didn't want. I grew up not watching that much TV. Whenever people talk about the average American watches 3 hours a day, I watch shows and I binge, but I kind of grew up not watching that much TV. But my mom loved Mr. Rogers, and all of us didn't understand why we watched it, but we still did. And it's I don't know. Everybody loves Mr. Rogers, but Frozen 2 is coming out. There's.
Excuse me while I run out the door to go see him. David Faris and I are going to get some popcorn and go see that one.
No, but I didn't even see the first one, but everybody tells me it's great. So I want to see those two. I got to catch up. And then, I don't know, this movie Knives Out, which I've seen the trailer for like a zillion times. Mick and I are like, we don't know if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad, but that came out too. And then there's another movie called Waves came out. So there's actually a lot of movies that came out this week that got pretty good reviews.
I will tell you this.
But I don't know which one I want to watch next.
My daughter saw Waves, and they got 2 thumbs way up for it. So I'm just saying, I'm going to go see that tomorrow.
Our critic, Richard Roper, gave it 4 stars. So.
4 stars. Yep. So my daughter's in Richard Roper. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, Rummana, I won't see you next week because we won't be here. So happy Thanksgiving to you.
Oh, yeah. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
And thank you for being such a great friend of my show since the day I showed up here way back when. How about that? As I always said when we had Denise on the show talking about her article, I go, well, Denise was I was the new kid in school, remember, Dee? And Denise said, and I said to Denise, will you be my friend? And Denise said, I'll be your friend. And Ramona was the same way, welcoming me to the bright one. So happy Thanksgiving to you.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you guys too.
All right, David Faris is on deck, the man, the myth, the legend. He's got a lot to talk about in terms of impeachment, in terms of debate, and we may, if the computer's working, throw some Rahm's quotes at him, see what he has to say about Mayor Rahm. We'll be right back with David Faris.
The L, LSD, the tree, the bean. There are some words that you have to be a Chicagoan to understand. Brush up on your Chicago lingo with that book Ben was just talking about. Chicagopedia. It's a brand new guide from the Sun-Times that hilariously defines the terms that any good Chicagoan should know. It's pocket-sized, making it a perfect stocking stuffer or gift this holiday season. Seriously, guys, this is a great gift. We've been talking about this for a long time. We got people on the live stream wanting us to do a bonus show over the Chicagopedia. I think we're going to do that. You can order your copy right now. I mean right now, NOW now. Head to suntimes.com/CST shop to order a copy of Chicagopedia today. Once again, that's suntimes.com/CT or CST shop. I can read. Okay. Guys, if you're listening on the live stream, hang tight. I'm going to try and fix our audio problem that we're having here. We're going to go on a quick break. The Ben Joravsky Show will return regardless with one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, David Faris. Hang tight, everybody.
After years of neglect, Illinois is finally getting its mojo back. That's correct.
Hey guys, I need to learn how to talk. I fixed the issue we were having.
Oh.
Yay! Yeah, I know, pretty cool, right? All right, so we can play audio again. That's good because we have Mayor Rahm Emanuel clips to play. Hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Friday, November 22nd is just moments away. But before we get into this, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring our program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace, not Aerosmith Workers, Local 126 and District 8. The International Union of, I got to get my copy here, the International Electrical Workers, Local 9, sponsor this program. And the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, they're sponsors of this program. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Now, here's where we check to see if the audio works, if we can play the intro.
See? All right, we're waiting.
Cross your fingers, Ben.
All right, here we go.
Let's see if it works.
Well, that worked.
I hear it.
That's not the intro. This is what we're looking for. The Ben Joravsky Show starts now. Yeah!
Oh, let's just redo the whole show.
This show's pretty country sometimes. Live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio, it is Friday, November 22nd, and this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, David Faris is back. I repeat, David Faris is back. We're talking one-on-one with David Faris about all things national politics. He's a professor. He's an author. Pretty funny, too. And now your host. Hey, he's kind of funny.
And he's not a professor.
Sometimes. Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
David Faris is indeed an author. Time to fight dirty. The Democrats can build a lasting majority. How the Democrats can build a lasting majority in American politics. David, I read this book, I think about a year ago, and I've been talking about it ever since and having you on various shows to talk about it. So welcome back, Cotter. And good to have you back. It's an interesting contrast, David. Follow me where I'm going to go with this. Earlier today, on a different show, the Fran Spielman Show, which I urge everybody to listen to, a podcast produced by Fran Spielman, the ace reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times City Hall reporter. She interviewed Mayor Rahm. Mayor Rahm was in this very room. He was sitting in that chair next to you.
I can almost feel it.
I've told so many people the story that Mayor Rahm was in this room where we do our podcast, and everybody pretty much had a joke, David, about exorcism and fumigation. All right, none of the Rahm exorcism
So
jokes.
I plan to play one of the Rahm clips in the last hour. So I'll play it now, and then I got one more clip that I'll play later on. How about that?
All right, we'll do it now. And the reason I'm setting it up this way because I've sort of put David Faris into one category in the Democratic Party, the David Faris wing of the Democratic Party, and Mayor Rahm I would put in the Mayor Rahm wing of the Democratic Party, and we'll hear Mayor Rahm, and we have David Faris here to comment as well. So which one are you going to play first, D?
All right, so Mayor Rahm joined Fran Spielman today. Yes, he was in this studio. That big giant banner was up and everything, and he's just sitting there doing he didn't say anything about it.
About the Ben Joravsky Show.
Yeah, didn't say anything, but he made sure to not talk about local politics, mainly Lori Lightfoot. But he did weigh in with his national thoughts here. Perfect. I don't think he had a clue David Faris was coming in on the show today.
No.
All right.
He probably wouldn't have come if he had known.
Yeah, if he had known you were going to sit in that seat. Yeah.
So we'll hear what he has to say here. First, he weighed in on Bernie and Elizabeth Warren in 2020.
And I just wrote this piece in the Post. I mean, I don't agree with, and I've been up front about Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, you think it's way too left.
Beyond it, I just think, look, it's you're taking risks in the primary that will become liabilities in the general. And it's also, as I wrote in this piece, and this is really what I believe, is it is not true to the Democratic creed. Redistribution economics is not. When you look at our creed, it's about work, responsibility, and opportunity. Social Security and Medicare, payroll tax. That's how they get funded. GI Bill, AmeriCorps under President Clinton, service to country. The earned income tax credit, which is the old negative income tax, is because you worked and we're going to lift you up. Yes, the key word there, earn. Redistribution, free college, free income, guaranteed income, free health care, all, $500 more bucks to Social
Vice
Security,
President Biden, you've suggested in your
I don't know what that was, but
I'm having a bad day here, dudes. We'll finish the rest of that clip in a moment.
it was.
The specter of Joe Biden also entered the room there for a second, which is appropriate, I think.
Is there any more to play in that one, do you?
Yeah, I got a little more here. Good God.
benefit of a greater security around retirement, all are not associated with either work, shared responsibility, equal access to opportunity. And to me, if anything Bloomberg or Duvall will do is that what I would call the traditional liberal wing of the party would get a wake-up call, because Warren and Sanders have brought their A game to the policy debate. I don't agree with it, but I know I can take hats off to them for bringing their A game. I don't know where the rest of the field has been as it relates to, in my view, how to give the type of securities and investments that are essential not only for what I call inclusive growth, which is a strategy that allows the economy to grow and everybody to grow with it.
All right. That, I think, pretty much sums up Rahm's view of the world, his interesting interpretation of what he calls the Democratic creed.
Yeah, where is that? I was wondering where that's written down. Because I feel like a creed is usually in some sort of holy book, right? Or something, and I don't know what he's talking about.
I just thought it was an awesome band.
Democratic creed. Right?
Yeah, it's a rock band. Rahm Emanuel on bass. But the Democratic creed, I think it's written down in Rahm's journal. So let's just assume that it's only written in that Washington Post article he was alluding to. The Democratic creed essentially is opposed to redistribution, which is his summary of what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren represent. So just in general response to all that.
I mean, it's preposterous, right? It's preposterous that the idea that the Democratic Party is or should be against redistribution of wealth is nuts, right? I mean, I don't even think that appeals to the wing of the party that he thinks he's appealing to. And you can tell he's delusional. Sorry, I know he was here, but you can tell that he's delusional because he references Mike Bloomberg and Deval Patrick, who, I have a better chance of being president than these two guys. Do you know what I mean? They're going nowhere. The fact that he sees those two guys as the saviors of the party at this moment in time is just so representative of his career and public life. I mean, if you go back to when he was Obama's chief of staff, he was arguing against the Affordable Care Act. He thought they should not have passed the bill. He's like, we're going to get killed in the midterms. Don't do it, right? And they did get killed in the midterms, but they also got the Affordable Care Act, which we still have. And if we had listened to Rahm and Rahm's theory of change, we would not have done this really big, important reform of our healthcare system that, I think the Democrats are positioning themselves to kind of finish next year or in the years to come. So I don't feel like he has a lot of credibility on that because he was on the wrong side of that debate. He was really on the wrong side of the history about that. And I'd ask you, how did inclusive growth work out for the city of Chicago during his 8 years of mayor? I don't think that's the way. I think that's the way it went here. My experience of being in Chicago that whole time, the rich got richer. The luxury complexes went up. People got pushed out of their neighborhoods, and I feel like a lot of people didn't feel included in the inclusive growth in the way that Rahm Emanuel would think that they should be. So I think that he's behind the times in terms of where the party's center is. I think he's way to the right of the party's center. Party center may not be as far left as we would like it to be, but I think it's moved beyond Rahm Emanuel.
Well, the whole notion of dismissing free college, which is really, I'm just absorbing this right now, Dave. It's the first time I'd heard it. So it's literally the first time I heard it. The notion of dismissing free college. Why? Why would it? First of all, when he was mayor of the city of Chicago, he bragged about how he had opened up community colleges for Chicago residents who did well in school. So why would be a program he bragged about as mayor be something that you would run away from on a national scale? Isn't publicly funded education like a bedrock of American life?
It is, and it's a bedrock of the Democratic Party, or what the Democratic Party should be. And the really funny thing about this is that, according to his critique, right, some of these policies are redistributionist, right? Mm-hmm. But in fact, the way that somebody like Klobuchar wants to address higher education, that's the redistributive part, right? That's where you're like, we're not going to send rich kids to school, or I don't know, we're going to put a tax on them, and then we're going to send the poor and the middle class kids to school for free, but not the rich kids. Right? And so in essence, you're taking social wealth and you're redistributing it to the poor and the middle classes. And I think that the plans that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are offering are open to everyone, right? Like even that means you have to send rich kids to school for free. You do it on the same theory that Social Security is built on, right? Which is that if everyone shares in the benefits of this program, even if they don't need them, right, it builds social solidarity around those programs. And I think this is actually the really big debate inside the Democratic Party that we are actually not having out loud. It's a theoretical debate about like means testing and how do you approach getting these programs to have broad public support, but nobody wants to couch it in those terms, which is really interesting to me. Maybe I'm like expecting to sit back at a Democratic debate and hear like an academic argument about means testing or something, but so that was my thought. I mean, I think like his critique of redistributionism does not square with the kinds of programs that he wants to see put into place, which I think are explicitly redistributionist. Like the earned income tax credit is redistributionist, right? So I just feel like the center of the party has moved beyond this sort of like, let's do a tax credit here and let's offer some people some tax incentives here, and everybody under a certain income threshold gets to do X, Y, and Z. I feel like younger folks are moving away from that model. Obviously, Bernie and Elizabeth are moving away from that model. And I kind of just think like the world has passed Rahm by and he doesn't get it.
I would say we'll get to the means testing point that you were raising, take a little deeper dive into that. But let's there's just the concept that's hitting me: free college. It's not free. Somebody would pay for it. It would be paid for out of publicly raised funds. That's what. It's not free. So yes, the idea is that a student would not have to pay a tuition, but the public would pay for the college through taxes. And if you have progressive taxes, wealthier people will pay more of the cost. So it's not free. The notion that college is free is like saying free school in the city of Chicago or in the town of Wilmette where Rahm went to school. Those schools weren't free. No. Taxpayers paid for those schools.
Social Security's not free, right?
Yeah.
We pay for it in taxes, So I just fundamentally don't understand what he's getting at. I mean, I do understand. I understand the wing of the party that he's from and what he's saying. I just don't think that message has a ton of appeal. And it's always interesting to me that the candidates in the sort of the moderate lane offer sort of these attenuated versions of the same thing, right? So like somebody like Klobuchar is like, well, let's do free community college for 2 years, and it's like, well, okay, sure, fine, but that's free college, right? Yeah. That's college. Community college is college. The word college is in the name. Community college, so you're offering free college, just not all of it, right? So I just don't think that argument really adds up.
All right, go back to what you were, take a little time to explain what you meant by the means testing. What do you mean by means testing?
So means testing is it's like a economics and political science jargon. It just means that a government program is only available if you fall below a certain income threshold. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what is being tested is your means to do this without government assistance. Right? So Medicaid, right, is means tested. Right? Like not a Medicaid expert, but it's pegged to the federal poverty line, and you're eligible for it up to a certain income level, and you're not eligible for it beyond a certain income level. Mm-hmm. And if you have a memory of filing your taxes last year, there's all kinds of stuff that's means tested. I do it through TurboTax. Because I'm an idiot, I can't do my taxes myself, obviously. And it's like, do you qualify? There's like 100 questions of like, do you qualify for this tax break? Do you qualify for this tax break? And it's like, nope. Like I'm doing fine, and so I'm not eligible for a lot of these things. But that's the idea. There's so much means testing embedded in the tax code, where it's like you got to be poor to get this thing, and it's like I think of it as like the governing equivalent of like a mail-in rebate, where that a certain number of people just aren't going to do it, and so you save your money that way. You're like, the sticker cost of the car is like, $23,000, and it's like you're being offered a manufacturer's rebate of $750. The car manufacturer knows that there's a certain number of people that will never mail the thing in, right? Because they don't care, or they don't need the rebate, or they forget, or they lose the form. In the same way that means testing is like people that are eligible for these benefits often don't understand how to navigate the system to actually get them, right? And it's very cumbersome. It's very cumbersome to use the government's assistance programs. So you have to prove that you're poor. You have to show up. It's humiliating, right? Like if you use SNAP benefits in a grocery store, it's slow. You got to hold up the whole line. It's like people get embarrassed, right? So there's all these ways that we shame people into not taking advantage of the things that the government is offering them, in addition to just like the lack of savvy about how to get them. Right? So I think that one of the stronger arguments that Sanders and Warren have is that you remove that layer of bureaucracy from the system. You just offer everybody the same thing. I have my own questions about how Medicare for All is actually going to work, to be implemented. Like, how does the world look the day before and after this legislation is passed? But that's a debate for a different day, right? We're still having this ideological debate about Medicare, and if, my question about Medicare has always been, if we can afford to pay for the healthcare of the oldest and sickest Americans, why can't we afford to do it for everybody else? Like, how does that add up from a social benefit or even in an expense perspective? And so, anyway,
well,
I'm rambling a little bit.
No, the issue that Rahm raises, and it was funny, he talks about how Bernie and Elizabeth Warren have their A game. And so, like, that's the bone he throws to them. Like, they're articulating their point of view, and now we have to articulate a counterpoint of view that will win over the public. And the part I think he's missing is that in this particular case, it's a Democratic public. It's a primary.
Right.
And I put aside the issue of whether Bernie's rhetoric and Bernie's platform will work in Wisconsin or Michigan better than Hillary Clinton's. We'll put that to the side for the moment. I can tell you right now, Bernie's platform and rhetoric work in the Democratic primary better than anything Hillary Clinton came up with for Wisconsin and Michigan. Bernie won those states, as I recall. And so I don't know what rhetoric Michael Bloomberg or Deval Patrick or Amy Klobuchar can come up with that could convince Democratic voters in a Democratic primary that they should open up the window and throw out everything they believe in about progressivity and taxes. Again, folks, if you're going to have a college program that is no tuition, you're paying for it through taxes, and you want progressive taxes so wealthier people pick up a greater share of it. That's what Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are talking about,
Yeah, and it's, there's just so many people in the party that are like afraid of their own shadow. It's like, let's have the debate that we want to have amongst ourselves right now, and then you deal with it later, and then when general election comes around, maybe you shift a little bit of the rhetoric or you shift the tone or something. But the reality is the Democratic primary voters are in favor of Medicare for all. I think it's something like 70%, right? The way that the debate is being driven right now is out of fear. And there's a lot of fear mongering on. I think Elizabeth Warren has borne the brunt of that over the last month, and it's hurt her numbers a bit. But it's just Rahm Emanuel after Rahm Emanuel after Rahm Emanuel, people exactly like him going on TV where they have disproportionate influence and scaring people into thinking that she can't win. And they're going to do the same thing to Sanders if Sanders takes over second from her, or if he becomes the front runner. There's a methodical, sort of media-driven narrative building that's taking place here that says, like, Warren is too risky, we can't go with her, we need somebody safe, like the 37-year-old mayor of South Bend, Indiana, or Amy Klobuchar.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think he's the safe choice, right? But like,
Mayor
whatever.
Pete gets pounded on this show. I should just let you know we have lefties, and they just and Mayor Pete gets pounded. It's not just Rahm, by the way. President Obama, in today's paper, gave another speech. This is the second time in 2 weeks, and every time President Obama gives one of these little speeches or talks to fundraisers where he says, lefties are going too far with their talk of a revolution. You're too politically correct. You're too woke. Then all my Dem friends posted on Facebook as to say, see, Ben, even President Obama thinks you're too far left.
Right.
So it seems like there's a concerted effort by a lot of the Dems in the Democratic Party to move, but the electorate doesn't want to be moved.
No. And I think that we'd be better off just fighting for the principles that we believe in. I mean, something that's always struck me about this debate is the assumption that the only people that are persuadable, like the only way to persuade swing voters is to like capitulate to what we think they think, right? Rather than trying to win them over. So, you know, the idea that like if you want to win the suburbs of Milwaukee or something, you have to be for the public option instead of Medicare for all as a default, as if we like know that the suburban voters of you know, outside of Milwaukee, that's what they want. Instead of saying like, let's at least set the challenge for ourselves of getting behind the, you know, the most aggressive, progressive legislation that we think can work. Let's get behind that legislation. Let's get behind those ideas and sell them to those people, right? Rather than assuming that we're going to lose the argument. I think there's a lot of fatalism and pessimism about some of the more, you know, some of the more lefty ideas in the primary that I'm not really sure is warranted, because there is some polling to suggest that people could be won over to these ideas if we tried hard
Well,
enough.
I'll put you this. I'll talk about polling. You said that Elizabeth Warren was bearing the brunt of it. The reality is, if you view Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders as the left sector of the Democratic Party, they're probably at 50% or close to it in most polls. So that's the dominant strain in the Democratic Party. And that doesn't even account for the fact that many older black voters probably agree ideologically with them, but are sticking with Joe Biden at the moment because he's a familiar face and he was Barack Obama's wingman. So, I mean, if you're going to just talk about polls, David, you just, well, two of the top three frontrunners on any poll that I've seen, Biden is usually the third. I'm not talking about Iowa. Where Mayor Pete's doing well these days. Nationwide, it's always Warren and Sanders,
right.
And so basically, Rahm is telling Democratic candidates, ignore 50% of the Democrats,
Of your own voters.
I'm like,
No, I know, and I feel like we lived through 20 years of this, you know, from the Clintons through like a few years ago, where it was like, well, we just got to make these compromises up front. Like I remember in 2008, I was thinking like, the one thing I want more than anything else in this primary is to be pandered to, you know, like somebody in the Republican base. Like, I just want people to say the most outrageous things to me, the most outrageous progressive thing. You've got to change it for the general election, fine, right? But I want to be.
yes, I understand.
I'm part of the.
You
base.
want to be loved.
I want to be loved. Show me the love. Say the things. Say the code. Like, say the words that I want to hear. You know, and I think that, you know, but Mayor Pete and Rahm and all these guys are from a different, like, sort of a different generation of American politics. Where Democrats were really afraid of, to be honest, I mean, afraid of expressing their principles because they thought that the country was not with them.
Or
right?
I'll take it this way. And then we have another Mayor Rahm bit to play. Or I'm going to just take it this way. I've thought a lot about this, and I've come to the conclusion, I'm a little slow sometimes, David. I've come to the conclusion that the whole electability debate is a cloak. And it's a cloak for the fact that the Mayor Rahms of the world disagree with Bernie, and they don't want they're protecting other interests, and they don't want his programs. So instead, I give Mayor Rahm credit. This is the first time I've ever heard a Democrat argue that the policies that 50% of the party at least want are against the mainstream of the Democratic Party. I've never heard a Democrat articulate it that. So he's at least heading in that direction. But generally, they use it as a cloak. They go, instead of coming out and saying they're against Medicare for all, they'll say, yeah, in a perfect world, I'd give you Medicare for all. But David, come on, be real.
Right.
It's not going to get you elected in Wisconsin.
And it's so not inspiring to hear people push policies that they really can't make an affirmative case for except through fear. You know, it's really just it's not inspiring to hear Amy Klobuchar be like, look, you know, this is the best I don't know, it's the best we can do. I'm sorry. You know, it's like you go to a restaurant, and you're like, how about the sea bass? And the waiter's like, you know, I can give you some whitefish, you know, it'll be okay, I guess. I'll tell the chef to make something that's just okay. Is that good for you?
Yeah.
You know?
No lobster for you, all right?
Yeah. Don't order it.
Don't order. I'll give you fish sticks. I liked fish sticks, by the way. All right, D, you got that?
Delicious.
Oh, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll play the rest of the Rahm quotes, get David's thoughts on it, and also take the deep dive on the debate and impeachment. We'll be right back.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters.
Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffemanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel. Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
Commercial break over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
David Faris in the studio, Roosevelt University political science professor, author of the book Time to Fight Dirty, How Democrats Can Build a Lasting Majority in American Politics. We're analyzing Mayor Rahm's view of the world and how the Democrats can capture the White House, and giving you David Faris's alternative view. You have another clip ready to go, D?
Absolutely. We're going to play that clip in moments. So, boy, you would really love our live stream chat. You got to get in and talk with these people sometime.
Okay. What's going on there?
Just a lot of not good things about Rahm that they're talking about.
Big surprise. The interesting thing that Democrats still take advice from Rahm Emanuel. This is a man who, despite all the enormous advantages he had as the incumbent mayor, chose not to run, largely because his policies had turned off, and his public behavior, had turned off such a large chunk of the electorate that it was by far from certain that he could win re-election. So he avoided that embarrassment by not running for re-election. And he, of course, is a former Clinton aide, and we're still dealing with the fallout from Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. I voted for Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. I don't try to hide that in any way, David Faris. I would vote for her again over Donald Trump, but her policies and the Clinton legacy is so widely reviled by so many people who I talk to on an everyday basis, who are not only loyal Democrats, part of the Democratic base, but are part of the crew that the Democrats have to bring in. Mm-hmm. And it's like this delusion that the party has that, like, this legacy is somehow venerable. Guys, If the 2016
over.
election wasn't the wake-up call,
Yeah.
you're never going to be woken up.
It's over. Yeah. And, I'd like to say the world has passed them by. A lot of Democrats like Rahm Emanuel are clinging to, their memories of a lost world, and that the lost world that they remember is one where they could cooperate with Republicans and get legislation passed. And that's, I think, the most fundamental thing that has changed in the last 20, 30 years is that kind of thing is no longer possible.
First of all, that thing was never possible in Rahm's lifetime as a political advisor. It was definitely not possible in the second term of the Clinton years where they tried to drive Clinton out of office on a sex scandal. It wasn't ever obvious in the Obama years where they literally opposed every initiative Obama made, and they're still trying to destroy Obamacare. So why... that hasn't existed since, I would argue, David Faris, since the 1980s when it was Democrats falling in line to follow a Republican-driven ideological orders by Ronald Reagan. It was Democrats falling in line with tax cuts that Ronald Reagan was proposing. I can't recall ever, correct me if I'm wrong, Republicans falling in line with Democrats, except for that brief moment. Everett Dirksen supported the civil rights bill that Johnson proposed. That was in the aftermath of John Kennedy being killed. Other than that,
it was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago, and so I think they're hearkening back to something that never existed. Actually,
Well, I mean, honestly, like pretty much everybody over 45 grew up in a political world in which Democrats felt like they had to be more like Republicans to win elections. Yeah. And there actually may have been something to that in the 80s and the 90s. I don't really dispute that Ronald Reagan was extremely popular throughout most of the 80s. And when they lost that third election in a row in 1988, that's where you get the real power of the Democratic Leadership Council, the DLC. People started calling themselves New Dems and New Democrats, and that's where Clinton came from. That's the legacy at that time, and so it may be the case that that's the only way the Democrats could win elections in 1992. Well, I don't dispute that. It may be we could have an argument about it, but it's no longer true.
It's no. I don't even think it was true then. I mean, now we're relitigating stuff from 1988, but I remember the 1988 election, and it was some parallels to now. Dukakis ran away from the left. He positioned himself as a centrist, a moderate. They skewered him. The Republicans skewered him as like this do-good liberal. So even though he was running away from the left, they still tagged him as the Willie Horton ads. So he was linked to the left of the Democratic Party. They race-baited him. He lost. Bill Clinton followed that Dukakis playbook. I still say, David Faris, that Bill Clinton was only elected because Ross Perot was in that race. And so once again, they lucked out and won, and they concluded that the way to win is to sell out your party's principles.
Yeah, I mean, that also makes sense. I mean, I do think the 92 election was highly unusual in terms of the history of post-World War II elections in the U.S. in the sense that Ross Perot got, 18% of the vote nationally? And we don't know, really. There's some dispute about where his votes would have gone. And I've heard people argue both ways. But the reality is that Clinton never had majority support.
That is correct.
Right? He didn't get a majority in 92. He didn't get a majority in 96. Again, because of Perot. And so, and then he happened to be elected at a time when we were about to embark on had already embarked on a long economic expansion. And so people, he had great ratings. He's very, he's a charming guy, right? Still is. Whether that tack to the center really ever worked in the way exactly that the DLC wanted it to work, I'm pretty skeptical, because ultimately what we're left with is the policies, and I think more than the pose of centrism, I think people have turned against the policies of the 80s and 90s era Democratic Party, in the sense that they haven't delivered the two things that they have not delivered, right? They have not delivered broad and shared prosperity. And they have not delivered less polarized politics, because if you're going to say, let's tack to the center to appeal to Republicans, which Democrats have done again and again and again in my lifetime, only to see the Republicans get crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier, okay? The story that Obamacare was just a Heritage Foundation idea, like it's a right-wing idea, it's not true, okay? But it is true that it represented a real sort of compromise with Republican principles, in that it preserved a private healthcare market, and it preserved a lot of prerogatives for the various stakeholders in the healthcare industry. And the Republicans went crazy. I mean, they just like they lost their minds. They made stuff up.
Yeah.
Remember death panels?
Yep.
Right. Remember? I mean, do you remember the hysteria? Of 2009, 2010?
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy, like how nuts Republicans went just because we were debating this, important but fairly, I think in ideological terms, fairly modest reform of our healthcare system, and Republicans lost their minds. Okay, so the idea that they're not going to lose their minds again when Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg tries to put a public option through, it's delusional. Right? I don't know how else to describe it at this point in time, that after 20, 30 years of this, that you think that moderating your own position is going to get Republicans to come aboard, just flies in the face of everything that we know about how partisanship works in America today.
Yeah, particularly Republican partisanship, how they play the game. If you want any evidence of that, you just watch the rhetoric coming out of the impeachment hearing. You got that, Rahm?
Absolutely. We're gonna play it here in moments here, but I just got to say this live stream chat is on fire. Ro weighed in. Ro's a fan of David Faris. Ro says David's a great political thinker. Love it when he's on the show. Yes, I don't know. Oh, well, then a talk of Howard Dean is going on right now on the live stream chat.
Howard Dean. Oh, no. The scream.
Saying he sold. Yes, I don't know why Howard sold out. Had been a moderate till we pushed him forward, so just went back there. Guys, if you're listening to this and you want a good political conversation, head over to the live stream, all right? People are weighing in and having a good time. And I think I know why this live stream's fired up. It's these Rahm clips, all right? We got one more to play.
Bring it.
But Rahm and Fran talked for like 40 minutes, okay? And you can find it at the Chicago Sun-Times website. Here's a clip of Rahm Emanuel that I picked just for David Faris. He's talking the 2020 election.
And it is the responsibility of the Congress to investigate whether there's been a violation of the law, and then holding a president for crimes and misdemeanors accountable. But if it blots out any part of an agenda that deals with healthcare costs, it deals with access to college, it deals with investing in America, then it's both an asset and a liability. The truth for Republicans, a vote, it can, if you look like all you're doing is helping Donald Trump, even when in the face of unbelievable facts, and you decide to dismiss this in 3 weeks with nothing else, that will hurt you.
Yeah.
So if I thought about this, if you look at it, and again, everything, it doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm framed by 1998 when I worked for Bill Clinton. In a month before the election, the Republicans acted on articles of impeachment, acted on holding an impeachment. That framed the midterm in which, for the first time in 100 years, the party in power won seats. It had never happened. And then they pursued it. And it came in tremendous liability, both in the midterm and after. If they overplayed their hand on the impeachment in 98, their danger, the Republicans, is underplaying their hand in 2020.
All right. I'm going to tell you what I think, and then I'm going to get your thought. Tremendous liability. I presume when he said tremendous liability, he was talking about liability to the Democrats. They overplayed their hand. I'm going to tell you right now, the roots of Hillary Clinton's downfall in 2016 were planted in 1998 when the Republicans drove to impeach him. They put it in everyone's mind what a sleazoid Bill Clinton is, so that when the Democrats raised the issue that Donald Trump was a sleazoid, that Donald Trump could hold a press conference with all the women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual harassment, and including a rape charge. So to say that it was a tremendous liability for the Republicans is totally erroneous. They worked to the Republicans' advantage both in the long term and the short term. The short term was the 2000 presidential election, where Al Gore, Bill Clinton's vice president, was so scared of having any kind of identification with Bill Clinton that he put him in the closet, wouldn't let him come out for the whole election, did not win the state of Arkansas, Bill Clinton's home state, lost electoral colleges there, did not win his own home state, Tennessee, lost electoral colleges there, and ultimately lost because they were too chicken to fight in Florida. And so I would say that as a strategy, it worked out pretty well for the Republicans. What do you think, David Faris?
Every time somebody says this, I feel like just like a stupidity angel gets its wings. I mean, it's a misreading of history, you know? Yeah, Republicans lost the 98 midterms. They lost the 98 midterms because Bill Clinton was at 65, 70% popularity and the country was booming, okay? They did not lose the midterms because of impeachment. Not only did they not lose the midterms because of impeachment, less than 2 years later, after that trial was finished, Republicans captured unified control of the federal government in 2000, okay? And they did some terrible things with it. So the idea that impeachment is a liability sometime in the distant future, even the near-term future, is absurd. And the idea that holding ongoing hearings into wrongdoing or alleged wrongdoing, or even things that you've made up, is a liability is preposterous. Okay, Benghazi, the 47 Benghazi hearings that Republicans held led to the Clinton email inquiry, and that is why Donald Trump is president. And they held Benghazi hearings throughout Barack Obama's second term. And nobody was like, oh, I mean, you don't want to be seen having an investigation.
Nobody in the Republican Party.
Nobody in the Republican Party was like, ooh, guys, if this is a little bit too much, we might lose 2016 because what's his name? That's long departed from the scene. Jason Chaffetz is holding too many.
You had, yeah.
Or Trey Gowdy, looks like he's been machine pressed. These guys, they didn't care. They didn't care about the consequences because they knew there would be none. Okay, and they knew that this long fishing expedition that they took on Benghazi actually led to real damage to Hillary Clinton. And I would argue, completely agree with you, that the impeachment of Bill Clinton did major damage to Al Gore and the 2000 presidential election for Democrats. It's not just that they had to hide Bill Clinton; it's that Gore was tainted with the scent of this scandal. Should he have been impeached and removed from office for what happened? No. Should he have been having an affair with his 21-year-old intern? No. Should he have lied? She lied to the FBI about it? Definitely not, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's a pretty good case to be made that if Bill Clinton resigned, Al Gore would have been an incumbent president in 2000, would have won. Depending on the timing of that resignation, he actually could have been president for like 10 years. Alternate history, right? But the idea that we need to be afraid of our own shadow over impeachment because of something that happened in 98 that's misunderstood. It's amazing to me that Rahm Emanuel was part of those events and still does not understand their implication.
Well, I think, whenever Rahm talks, gives advice, I don't know if he's speaking from his heart or it's part of a larger political calculation. And I would say, again, going back to what I said earlier about electability being as the issue that they put as a cloak to cover up the fact that many of these Democrats opposed Bernie's platform, Elizabeth Warren's platform. They don't want it to happen.
Right.
And so, but they realize that their party wants it, so they cloak it with electability. So now the issue of impeachment, somehow or other that gets, I do not understand how a Democrat can look at this situation and say avoiding confrontation with Donald Trump is the best step forward. Explain that to me.
I don't see how you could look at the events of the last 3 months, which have resulted in an impeachment inquiry, which are going to result in articles of impeachment. I don't think how you could look at the last 3 months and say that this has been damaging for Democrats. Okay. Has it ended, has it decisively turned, the Trump's base against him or something? No. But I don't think it's hurting Democrats at all. Right. And I've written many times that I think the Democrats should be holding impeachment hearings every week from now until Election Day, okay, and that the way to get around Mitch McConnell is to pass those pass 50 articles of impeachment 3 days before the 2020 election, right? Because if we wrap it up really quickly right now, all we're doing is we're giving Mitch McConnell the initiative and the opportunity to frame the rest of how this unfolds for the American people. Mm-hmm. Okay? Whereas if we keep it in the House, right, we go to court to try to get Mulvaney and Bolton to testify. We wait that out. While we're waiting that out, we have a bunch of hearings about obstruction. While we're waiting that out, we have a bunch of hearings about separating children from their parents at the border, which is a crime against humanity. That the President of the United States has ordered federal agents to violate the Genocide Convention. He's ordered federal agents to violate the Geneva Conventions. Okay. So have hearings about that. Frankly, in my mind, as much as I enjoyed the last 2 weeks of my life, watching politics in the middle of the day, like I have no job or something, you know.
Well, that is your job.
It is my job,
Yeah.
but it was a little bit like pajamas and coffee, and I'm like, just watching my stories, you know. Wouldn't it be, you know, like, and it was very interesting, you know, career foreign service professionals. I think it was a very, you know, they created a good narrative. But how much better would it be to have people testifying against like war crimes that the president ordered at the border, you know, and have people talking about how their children were ripped out of their arms and stuff. You know, like I just think that there's so much more theater that the Democrats could get out of this that would be incredibly damaging.
Well,
to the
this
president.
gets to the cautious aspect of Democrats, and there's this pretense that Obama put out, and that Clinton put out, and that Rahm's sort of following along. That, follow me on this one, and I'm going to do my best to articulate it. That there's a bipartisan spirit that exists in America, that where most Americans believe they're not ideologues of one sort or another. They just want what makes sense and what's right. And so they don't want to be seen like they're Democratic warriors trying to just beat up on Trump. They want what's fair. And, you know, Obama always remember, you know, that was the rhetoric that got him elected. There's no blue America. There's, you know, there's no red United States, whatever it is. There's only the United States. Clinton talks about in those terms, like Michelle Obama talked about those terms. When they go low, we go high. In other words, most Americans believe that if you play fair, you know, that's the way to go. They'll support a politician that does that. Now, the map, now this gets to one of your favorite themes, David. It seems as though the way the congressional maps are drawn, it favors Democrats who play along with this ideology. And I think that's what Rahm is talking about. In other words, you want to win where Lauren Underwood won in a swing district like that, because the way the map is drawn, you have to pretend as though there is this bipartisanship that exists.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dispute that there's something to that in terms of like, I do think at least a plurality of Americans would still tell a pollster, I believe in bipartisanship, like I want the two parties to work together. They're super turned off by people yelling at each other in DC. My touchstone for this actually is my own brother, who's like my brother is the left-leaning voter that I when I talk to him, I always get really important insights from him, because he's not a political maniac, right? Like he doesn't sit around. I mean, he's not like me, right? He has like a real job. He's an oncologist, but he follows, you know. And I remember prior to the debate, before the debate started, he was like into Kamala Harris, okay. And I remember when Kamala Harris like went after Biden in that first debate, I texted him and I was like, Jace, man, you know, your candidate had a great night, and he was like, no, I don't like her anymore. He's like, I don't like it. She was mean to him, right? And
okay, he's more liberal. He's a liberal.
He's a liberal, but he described himself as an independent, right?
Okay.
And I think he has occasionally voted for Republicans for certain like sort of down ballot offices. But he was for Bernie in 2016. So I know, but there's a lot of people like my brother out there, right, who don't see politics through a purely ideological prism.
Well, why would he be for Bernie?
You know. It's a long story for another day. Okay. I think it's like
let's put your brother on the couch.
Yeah, but he's very smart, and he has a certain aesthetic of politics that he seeks out, and the nastiness really turns him off. And I think there's a lot of people for whom this like the sort of like they just hear people yelling and arguing with each other, and it's the same. You know, both parties are the same. They hate each other. It's just click it off. I want somebody to tell me that we can actually overcome this, that we can work through it. And I agree with my brother about many things in life, but this is not one of them. To me, like the story of American history is a story of war between like selfish, racist bastards and everyone else. And every period of American history has had a political party and that has been the vehicle for the selfish, racist bastards. And right now that vehicle is the Republican Party, and the Republican Party needs to be like just fought and fought and fought. It's a never-ending struggle. They'll never give up. They'll never give in. They're never going to work with us. They're never going to give us a hug and be like, you guys were right about Medicare. I'm so sorry. Like, oh, you guys were right about racism. Yeah. Like Colin Kaepernick can kneel. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about that. They just have to be beaten. You know what I mean? But I also understand why you can't necessarily go out and say that in exactly those terms. because it would turn too many people off, right? Like there are too many people who believe in a mythology of bipartisanship and frankly, a mythology of the way that politics works in any democratic society. There's too many people that believe in that. For them to go out and be like, what we should do, we just gotta, you don't have to reach across the aisle when there's no one there, man. We just gotta get rid of them. So that does not appeal to people. And so I understand why you may not want to project an aesthetic of all out war against the Republican Party, even in your own primary, right? I think like one of Hillary Clinton's worst moments from 2016 was when somebody was like, who are your enemies? And she was like, Republicans are my enemies. I believe that in my heart, Ben. I do. But I don't think most people do. I don't think most Democratic primary voters do. But I think that where the moderates are wrong is they confuse that instinct for comedy, for not comedy, but for bipartisanship. They confuse the instinct for nice politics, for not nasty politics, with a broad reticence for interesting or progressive policies. Okay? And I think you've seen this actually some of the polling of the Democratic primary electorate. That has had people on Twitter being like, oh, this is so weird, Like you go to voters in Iowa, and they're like, it's really important to me that we work with the other party. I don't want anything too radical. Also, I want big structural change. Do you know what I mean? So, and you should follow this Twitter account. It's called, I think it's called American Voter Bot. And like a couple times a day, it just tweets out a profile of an American voter, and it's like, I'm a white Catholic from Wisconsin. I believe that abortion should be illegal in all circumstances, but I've only voted for Democrats in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because the actual profiles of actual American voters are just really, really weird in ways that don't make sense to people who are really invested in a particular ideological vision of politics. And so there has to be a way to appeal to that sense, to people who are not ideologues and who don't think of themselves as ideologues. But you still reach out to them and try to convince them that the progressive policies are the best ones.
Well, here's the interesting thing about listening to what you said, and not picking on your brother, but view it this way. If a voter like your brother is turned off by the, let's say, Hillary Clinton's rhetoric that I'm against Republicans, which when I heard you say that, I was like, I don't remember her saying that, but boy, I wish I can get behind that.
Yeah.
And so they go, well, I'll vote now for the Republicans. Donald Trump, since he came down that escalator in 2015, has demonized, vilified, marginalized all Democrats. There's no difference between Ocasio-Cortez and Amy Klobuchar. No difference between the far left and Mayor Pete. They're all the same, and they're going to tax you. They're going to let criminals in. They're not going to protect you. So he's unwavering. So here's the little trick bag that the Democrats are in. They're afraid they're going to lose your brother if they're counterpunch, if they come hard on the Democrats. Republicans think they're going to pick up your brother if the Democrats play like Republicans. So in other words, what you're telling me is that Republicans don't fear any consequence from playing the game hard, from lying, from distorting, from demonizing. But Democrats are always in fear of they're going to lose your brother.
Right. I mean, I have to say, you don't have to worry about my brother.
I know. I'm just using him as like a prototype.
But I think, some of this, honestly, it just goes back to some of the stuff I wrote about in the book, but it does come back to sort of institutional design. Okay. If you look at the 2020 election, have you heard anyone, like, on the face of the earth argue that Donald Trump is going to win the popular vote next year? Like, nobody, right?
Nobody.
There's not a poll, there hasn't been a poll done in the last 2 years that suggests that Donald Trump has, like, the slightest chance of winning the national popular vote. Okay. And if we had a political system that reflected that reality, okay, if we had a political system that reflected the majority, right, it would be Republicans who were having this chase their own shadow debate about are we too radical or are we not too radical, just like they did after 2012 and they ignored their own report, okay? But the reality is we don't have that system. And I think that there is a sense to which Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, at least for one more election cycle, are going to have disproportionate impact on the outcome here. And so it is the Democrats that have to be like, are we too radical? I'd rather just see them get behind the policies and sell them to those people But I understand that that's not necessarily going to happen. But so much of this is produced by the stupid, antiquated, anti-democratic, anti-majoritarian electoral system that we have that invests these 7, 8, 9 states with so much importance. We in Illinois, everybody in California, everybody in New York is completely ignored in presidential elections. No one cares what we think, right?
Well, we're the pawns. If you ever played chess, we're the pawns. We're, and I tell people in Illinois say, well, I don't need to vote because the electoral system. I go, no, you got to vote because we're a pawn. We're only a small part, but we're a part. And so if you don't vote and the Republicans take Illinois, they've taken a pawn. So in a larger chess game, that matters. All right. So you got to vote. All right? So you're not like a rook or something like that. That would be Wisconsin. You're not the queen. That would be what? Michigan?
I think the queen is Wisconsin in this scenario.
Yes, the queen is Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, my guess is the entire 2020 election will be waged in the state of Wisconsin.
They're just going to camp out there.
They're just going to, because I don't know if you saw this during the debate. What's old boy's name for? I love this guy. He's like the geeky guy.
Old boy.
Andrew Yang?
No, not
Geeky guy.
The
I'm sorry,
correspondent
I
for
beat your guy.
MS. Oh, that was a good line by Andrew Yang.
good, yeah.
MSNBC, the reporter who always has the maps. And where's Frank when I
Chris
need him?
Hayes?
No. Chris, this guy is beyond Chris Hayes. This guy's really, he knows inside politics. He knows the electoral college. He's like, he wears I could just see his picture in my mind's eye. He's the guy that always is explaining the electoral maps. And, how many, anyway, whatever his name is. There was a break in the debate. And he laid out this scenario.
Nate Silver?
No. This guy, he's kind of like Nate Silver, but he's on TV. And he's like a weatherman. He stands in front of a map, only instead of a map of weather, it's an electoral map of the United States. And he goes, hey, if you look at Iowa, they got 20 electoral votes. And in 2018, 2008, they went for Barack Obama. But in 2016,
Steve Kornacki. Steve Kornacki.
Who said that?
Shout out to Dragon Slayer 19 on the YouTube live
Dragon
stream.
Slayer, you are the man. The steak knives have been just sent to you in the mail.
Today, you are Dragon Slayer 1.
You are Dragon Slayer 1. So, Steve, yeah, I love this dude. He's like real geeky. He gets into it just like I do. He laid out this scenario where there would be a tie. Did you see this one, electoral tie?
I mean, it's definitely possible.
It's possible because if Michigan and Pennsylvania go Democrats, which they probably will, that means Wisconsin. If Wisconsin, right? If Wisconsin stays Donald Trump, it will come down to like these
congressional districts.
Maine and Nebraska.
Maine, yeah. So I have a friend I used to play fantasy baseball with. Who runs a website.
Speaking of geeks.
Yeah, I know. I got some pretty geeky habits. I don't have a life. That's my outlet. Okay,
That's a good life. I like my life.
He runs a website called 270 to Win. And you can go to 270 to Win and you can just click on the states and turn them whatever color you want and game out the various scenarios. But yeah, there's definitely a non-zero chance of a 269 tie. And then each state's congressional delegation gets a vote.
Yeah, no, old boy explained that on TV, and I didn't understand that. So do you...
House delegations.
So in other words, as he explained, my understanding of what Steve explained on the TV, all of the congressmen in California would vote, but that would only be one vote, correct?
One vote.
So once again, it's like a rigged system.
Yeah, the stupid, antiquated system is going to work against us again.
So the Democrats can't win, even though they have the House, by because Wyoming would get as many votes as California.
Correct. Yeah.
Dude,
correct.
I know.
Listeners out there, I just want you to absorb that. How is that even remote?
So dumb. Our system is so dumb. Like, and the reverence for the American political framework in this country is so shocking to me. It's like the one thing that I'm not in a partisan sense, but it's like the one thing on the first day of Intro to American Politics that I teach. I'm like, I'm gonna try to break your reverence for this system. I'm not gonna try to turn you into a Democrat or Republican or whatever. It's at Roosevelt, so they're all Democrats anyway.
Yeah.
But like, I'm gonna try.
Name for a president or a Democrat. Yes.
Yeah, named after Eleanor Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. In fact, she a big part of the founding of Roosevelt University. So if there's one thing that I accomplish in that class, it's that for students to leave the class being a little bit more skeptical about the shape of their institutions and some of the rules that structure our politics, and that they were not passed down by God. They were written over candlelight by slaveholders like 300 years ago. and it's not working anymore. It's a broken system.
Well, this is a perfect segue to the impeachment and an article you wrote about the impeachment inquiry, the notion of reverence in the political system. One thing I sort of admire about Donald Trump, and in heavy emphasis on sorta and admire in quotes, is the way in which he is completely unafraid to throw out the window any semblance of reverence for anything. And so if necessary, like, foreign policy, if he wants to reinvent foreign policy on the fly, only to reinvent it the next day, he'll say, the people I'm throwing out, I'm overturning the wisdom the people sent us to the Iraqi war, which is like, oh, wow, I could buy that. And then he just sends soldiers from Syria to
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. Like, what? Huh? Don't follow just listen to what he says at that very moment. Yeah. But he is attacking the reverence in the system by giving them 2 middle fingers at the entire system, telling his aides not to respond to subpoenas, ordering them to sit out there. And that led to something very interesting that you wrote called The Blob, or it was an essay you wrote for The Week, where you were talking about the brain trust of American foreign policy, like these bureaucrats that reside in the White House and the State Department, who have been participants in foreign policy decisions forever. And they're now testifying against, some of these people are testifying against Donald Trump in these impeachment. And Donald Trump is like trying to rally America against them. That is beyond irony in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, Trump and his allies have been railing about the so-called deep state, right? Since he was elected, and how the deep state is out to get him. The deep state is like this sort of, they always call them unelected bureaucrats, as if there's any other kind. The unelected bureaucrats, and they're deep in the bowels of government, who are like, working away to bring down the president. And so I think one interesting thing that's been the result of these impeachment hearings is that the American people getting a chance to hear these people talk, because most people do not know anyone in the CIA, right? Like, most people do not know anyone in the Foreign Service. Yeah. This is a very niche profession. They're almost all in DC, they're overseas. It's not like there's a branch of the Foreign Service in Chicago where we can go meet nice people from the State Department, right? Mm-hmm. So most people never have any interaction with these folks. And so what they saw on TV were these like very sober-minded, like serious, like really smart people who did not seem to have an ideological animus against the president. They were just like, why is what was happening here? Why was the president trying to break the law? Why was the president trying to subvert this policy to his own personal ends? And so to me, just having Fiona Hill out there, and I have a lot of disagreements with these people ideologically. Okay. And so but for the people to see them as not like these ranting, raving, like never Trumpers, conspiracy mongers, I think that was a productive thing. For Democrats, I also think it was a good kind of glimpse for Americans to get into the workings of government. So I actually have thought about the last 2 weeks as a kind of a seminar, a collective foreign policy seminar that we're all taking together. And there's no exam.
There's no exam.
But it's like,
well, the presidential election is sort of an exam. But anyway,
yeah, no, exactly. But the blob refers to, so that was phrase that Obama's advisor Ben Rhodes came up with to describe like this amorphous pushback that they would get anytime that they tried to change the existing direction of American foreign policy, and so when they were trying to do the Iran deal, the blob, as Rhodes would describe it, it's like this circular logic. It's like a former assistant secretary of defense in the Bush administration gets a job at the Brookings Institution, and he goes on CNN every night and rails against the Iran deal, right? CNN influences the people who are watching it, right? And also elected officials watch these shows and they take their cues from them. And then when they're done being on CNN from the opposition, when the Republicans take power, they go back into the government and they shape policy in the exact same way that they were taught. Mm-hmm. Okay. Does this make sense?
Yeah, Mayor Rahm is in the middle of that right now as he's giving advice to Democrats before he goes back into office somewhere.
Yeah, and it's like, they all went to the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. They went to American University, and they're all like very smart people. I send my students into these schools to try to do these things because I think we need good, progressive people on the inside of the American government carrying out these policies. But it is a bit rigid in terms of their vision of what foreign policy is, right? And that has been, like you said, the signature foreign policy move of President Trump has not been anything like particularly ideologically coherent. It's just been him being able to be like, you know what? NATO's kind of stupid. Why are we in NATO?
Yeah.
You know? And I think that there was an assumption on everyone's part that the whole American public would recoil and be like, no, like we love NATO. And it's like, actually, people don't really care about this stuff at all. And to the extent that they do care about it, they think that we spend too much money on it anyway. There's the very famous thing in political science where you ask people how much money you think we give as part of the federal budget for foreign aid, okay, which is like less than 1%. But when you ask people, they'll be like 10%, 15% of our budget we're just giving away to the Czechs or, you know, to various countries in Africa. So there's like a wild misperception of how much money we spend on this stuff. I'm not really sure where I'm going with this.
No, I know
point,
exactly
but,
where you're going. So Donald Trump taps into that very successfully. And I was speaking of this, it's where Donald Trump's rhetoric, some of it, just a tinge of it, sort of corresponds with, say, Tulsi Gabbard's rhetoric. And it's maybe why she's so popular with some of the same people that love Donald Trump. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come right back. We're going to close with David Faris's prediction or his assessment, which Democratic candidate prospered the most from yesterday's debate. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times. Ben Joravsky, take us home.
David Faris, before we head out that door, which Democratic candidate did the best for him or herself in the debate?
That's so hard to say. I mean, I think the people that had the best night, from my perspective, Kamala Harris, I thought had a great night. I thought she was very effective. I thought Amy Klobuchar had a great night. I'm not sure that they moved the needle very much. I think the person who was sort of a newly minted frontrunner in Iowa, who needed to sort of reintroduce himself to a national audience and convince people that this is plausible, was Pete Buttigieg. And as much as I'm not voting for him and he's not my guy, I do think that he benefited from his performance, which was steady. He took the questions about, you know, his lack of support in the black community, and he took that head on. He talked about his own background as, you know, as a gay man, and how that, you know, like, I don't know how felicitous it was, but I thought he did pretty well with these questions. And I think that he got enough time that he took some time away from Warren and Sanders, who I thought did great, but I'm also inclined to always think that they do great because I agree with what they're saying. You know, and I think when you're watching these debates, you have to be careful to look at what's transpiring and sort of take off your own sort of blinders about what, you know, what appeals most to you, and think like, who's taking momentum out of this debate. I got to be honest, and I got to say that I think that Pete Buttigieg did pretty well. I certainly didn't do anything to arrest his momentum in Iowa, which is he has to win Iowa to get the nomination. I think he then has to win New Hampshire to win the nomination. He's going to get clobbered in South Carolina, so I think that he did pretty well. I thought Harris had a really great night. Actually, she had some really substantive discussions about childcare policy. Cory Booker was really funny at various points. When he was like, I've been a black voter since I was 18, you know, just some really nice moments for him. It was honestly, I thought it was the best debate we've had so far, because there was the least nastiness. The moderators were not trying to get nastiness out of the candidates. There was substantive exchanges. They were like joking around with each other and stuff, you know. That's the kind of debate, honestly, that I think the Democratic rank and file wants to see. And it's kind of a shame that it took place on a night with such a big impeachment hearing.
Yeah,
I don't think people watched it.
I would have to go short answer Cory Booker, because he survived to the next debate. He made that last pitch, and I think he's already made it to the next debate. David Faris, it's always a blast talking politics with you. Time to Fight Dirty is the name of his book. I think Mayor Rahm should read that book. I also want to thank Rummana Hussain for being on the show, as she is on every Friday. And, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. Oh, yeah, back home in Alton, they call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. We won't be here next week, but we got a ton of shows lined up for you to enjoy. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Hey, and hats off to the live stream chat room today. You guys were on fire. Remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, chicagosuntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you download podcasts. Downloaders, we live stream this program Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time. Once again, chicagosuntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. Yes, we will be gone all next week. Make sure to download our bonus interviews and get a question in while you can now at BennyJShow@gmail.com. Send us a question. We're going to do a Benny J Q&A special. Whatever question it is, and like I said earlier, trolling encouraged.